After the divorce, I was tricked into joining a dating show, and my ex-wife panicked. Chapter 110 Goodbye Huang Ming, Shooting MV. After returning to the sofa, Luo Ji and the others looked at Shen Yu eagerly. Shen Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry, I didn't tell Mr. Feng about those two poems." After hearing this, the two smiled immediately. Luo Ji hesitated for a moment, but still asked, "Then, Mr. Feng won't be angry, right?" Shen Yu smiled and said, "Mr. Feng is not that kind of stingy person, he just loves literature to the core, don't think too much." After hearing this, Luo Ji finally felt relieved. Shen Yu looked at Su Jinyu on the side. "Jinyu, why don't you go back? Tomorrow, Lao Huang will come. We have to finish the filming of Kai Ling's MV. The time is tight and the task is heavy." Su Jinyu rolled her eyes at Shen Yu, took Luo Ji's arm and said with a smug look, "HMPH, I'm staying with Luo Ji tonight. If I don't go home, you'll be pissed to death." Shen Yu looked at Luo Ji after hearing this. After seeing Luo Ji nod, he continued, "Then go to bed early. Lao Huang's flight will be tomorrow morning, and we still have to go to the airport to pick him up." After that, he went into the bathroom to wash up. No words were spoken all night. The next morning, Shen Yu was woken up by his biological clock as usual. After changing his clothes, he went downstairs for a morning run. The only difference is that no one brought breakfast today. After the morning run, Shen Yu bought breakfast for 3 people and returned home. He washed off the sweat on his body first, then woke up Luo Ji and the other 2. After the 3 of them finished their meal, Su Jinyu drove her car and took the 2 to the airport. After waiting for more than half an hour, Huang Ming came out with a small suitcase. Beside him was a woman wearing a casual suit and looked very capable. The 2 of them were chatting and laughing. Seeing this, Shen Yu immediately took Luo Ji and Su Jinyu to greet them. Huang Ming also saw Shen Yu at this time, raised his hand to say hello, and shouted loudly, "Old Shen." After the 2 met, they hugged each other warmly, and then Huang Ming said hello to Luo Ji, and then he pulled Old Shen to the front of the woman in the suit and said with a smile, "Old Shen, let me introduce you, this is the head of the copyright department of NetEase Music, Minister Wang Mani." As soon as their voice fell, Wang Mani took the initiative to extend her hand and looked at Shen Yu with a smile. "Hello, Teacher Shen, I like your songs very much, and the song Kai Ling surprised me. I never thought that the opera voice would be so beautiful in the song." Shen Yu smiled and shook hands with her. "Hello, Minister Wang, thank you for your love." Wang Mani did not hide anything and said directly, "Teacher Shen, actually I came to see you this time. Because I don't have your contact information, I can only ask Teacher Huang Ming to come to you. I am here on behalf of NetEase." Shen Yu knew what she meant when he heard it. He said with a smile without replying, "Oh, but I really don't have time today. How about we make an appointment another day?" Wang Mani smiled and nodded when she heard it. "Of course, so, do you have time tomorrow morning?" Shen Yu pondered for a while, then nodded. "Then let's meet at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll send you the address later." Wang Mani nodded, and then said goodbye to a few people and left alone. After Wang Mani left, Shen Yu hit Huang Ming lightly and scolded him with a smile. "Old Huang, why didn't you tell me in advance?" Huang Ming heard this and said with a smile, "I'm giving you a surprise." Wang Mani is very generous. She is the director of the copyright department of NetEase and is trusted by the top management. As long as she signs the contract, the treatment is the best among the same level. Shen Yu rolled his eyes at Huang Ming. "Then I have to thank you. Let's go quickly. We only have 1 day, and the filming team has already arrived at the scene." When talking about business, Huang Ming also became more serious. Then the 4 of them drove to an antique building, which was one of the few theaters now. Yesterday, Luo Ji had communicated in advance, so at this time in the theater, there were only 2 guards and no one else. In the parking lot outside the theater, there were already several cars parked, and one was a bus. The people sitting in the bus were all extras that the filming team had found in advance. That is, the actors who played the little devils and others. After seeing Shen Yu and others, a middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap and looking a little fat hurriedly came up. Seeing this, Su Jinyu smiled and introduced. "Shen Yu, this is Zhang Xiao, a very good chief cameraman. We have worked together several times. I found his team this time. Hearing this, Shen Yu smiled and took the initiative to extend his hand and said, "Teacher Zhang, thank you for your hard work." Zhang Xiao immediately felt a little flattered, and shook Shen Yu's hand excitedly. "It's not hard, it's not hard. Teacher Shen, I've read the script you sent me yesterday. It's really great. It's my honor to be able to shoot this MV." Shen Yu smiled and nodded. Then he asked everyone to start preparing. Shen Yu was no stranger to filming. He was originally a student of the Shanghai Drama Academy, which was his main profession. He was also a director in his previous life, so it was easy for him to shoot an MV. After all the equipment was installed and everyone changed their clothes, Shen Yu directed the filming staff to start filming step by step. Although it was only a short 3-minute MV, it was still quite difficult to shoot. It took more than 2 hours to shoot all the previous scenes. As for the last scene of burning the theater, it was replaced by special effects later. It was impossible to burn down someone else's theater. When Zhang Xiao left with his team, he looked at Shen Yu enthusiastically and said, "Teacher Shen, if you need a filming team in the future, please contact me." After these 3 hours of filming, Zhang Xiao completely became a fan of Shen Yu, and was conquered by his profound directing skills. Zhang Xiao is also a cameraman who has seen the world, and has worked with many directors, including well-known directors who have shot billions of box office. However, he still thinks that Shen Yu's skills are better. He perfectly grasped every detail of the filming. He was like a machine, and there was no mistake in the whole filming. Not to mention anything else, this MV, if it were another director, it might take 3 days. Working with Shen Yu, the whole person is very relaxed, but the efficiency is surprisingly high, so he prefers to work with Shen Yu. Shen Yu saw this and said with a smile, "If you need it in the future, we will contact each other again. I hope we will have the opportunity to cooperate in the future." Zhang Xiao nodded, and then left with his team. What if he could get the special effects part of the MV out as soon as possible? Chapter 111. Is the alcohol content of this wine so high? After Luo Ji took off her makeup in the lounge and changed back into her original clothes, she returned to Shen Yu and others. After Su Jinyu saw Luo Ji, her eyes began to glow with gold. Without waiting for Luo Ji to come over, she went straight to her. She looked at her excitedly and said, "Luo Ji, your performance on the stage just now was really great. Can you teach me to sing opera?" Luo Ji looked at Su Jinyu with expectation, and hesitated to speak. As the saying goes, opera is not sung, but flows from the throat. If you don't have a little talent, you really can't play it. Su Jinyu couldn't even sing well, so it was a fantasy for her to learn to sing opera. Seeing Luo Ji's difficulty, Shen Yu stepped forward and took the initiative to help her out, saying, "Jinyu, you should practice singing first, and then talk about singing opera after you have practiced well." Although Shen Yu's words were relatively tactful, Su Jinyu was not a fool. Of course she could hear what Shen Yu meant. It was nothing more than that her level was not good enough, she had no talent, and she couldn't learn it. She immediately rolled her eyes at Shen Yu and didn't say anything else. She knew her level herself. It was already noon, so Su Jinyu took the 3 of them and drove towards Shen Yu's home. When they arrived at the gate of the community, the 4 of them went in and bought a large number of ingredients. After the relief last night, Shen Yu's right-hand fingers had been much less swollen. In addition, Huang Ming came all the way from Beijing, so Shen Yu naturally had to cook a table of dishes to entertain him. Besides, this was something that had been discussed before when recording the show. Seeing that Shen Yu's fingers were still not healed, Luo Ji felt a little distressed, so she took the initiative to take over the work of cutting vegetables. Su Jinyu also took over the fire of washing vegetables. Shen Yu only needed to cook. Huang Ming wanted to help, but Shen Yu's kitchen was too small. It was already stretched to accommodate 3 people, and there was really no room for him. He began to visit Shen Yu's room. However, Shen Yu's apartment was too small. It was just a simple 2-bedroom apartment with a living room. The tour was finished in a few minutes. Huang Ming was a little bored, so he leaned against the kitchen door and chatted with Shen Yu. "Hey, old Shen, you've made so much money for so many years, but you haven't thought about moving to a bigger house." Shen Yu heard this, and said with a smile while skillfully stirring the spoon with his left hand, "I originally wanted to move to a bigger one, but Cao Zi directly abducted me to the program group, and I haven't had time. I know a sales manager of Thompson. Do I need to introduce him to you?" Shen Yu was a little surprised when he heard this. "You don't live in Beijing, how do you know the sales manager of Thompson?" Wang Ming looked at him with contempt. Please, I also have a house in Shanghai, and I come here to live for a while every year. I have a house in Thompson. If you move in, we will be neighbors. Before Shen Yu could speak, Su Jinyu on the side mercilessly exposed him. You just want to eat Shen Yu's food. Wang Ming, who was exposed, was not angry, and smiled. Shen Yu's cooking skills are so good that it's hard to forget after eating it once. Soon, a table of Shanghainese dishes was freshly cooked by Shen Yu. 4 people sat around the dining table. Wang Ming took out a bottle of wine from his suitcase. Smiling. Old Shen, I'm not a stingy person, 30-year-old mousy, you are lucky, where is the wine glass? Shen Yu heard this and took out the wine glass from the cabinet. Old Wang, you really brought wine. That's right, when did I break my promise? While Wang Ming was talking, he opened the bottle cap and filled the wine into the wine dispenser. Shen Yu saw this, a trace of fear flashed across his face. He was not very good at drinking, let alone such a strong alcohol. He immediately stopped him. Enough, Lao Wang, let's just get a little tipsy. Wang Ming ignored him, and after filling the wine dispenser, he said, This wine dispenser is only 2 taels full, what are you afraid of? The 2 beauties have nothing to do today, so you can drink a little. After that, Wang Ming filled the glasses in front of several people. Raised the glass and smiled. Thanked Lao Shen and the 2 beauties for their warm hospitality, everyone cheers. The 3 of them also raised their glasses and clinked them lightly in the air. Shen Yu drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. Instantly, his mouth was filled with an elegant and delicate fragrance, which was endless aftertaste. After taking a sip, his face was like a magic trick. Instantly covered with a layer of pink. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu, who were standing by, just took a sip, so there was nothing unusual. Wang Ming looked at Shen Yu, whose face had changed. He stood up and filled his glass with wine, and said with a teasing look, Old Shen, your alcohol tolerance is really poor. After taking a sip, it instantly went to your face. Shen Yu smiled and said, Don't worry about these details. Let's focus on eating. Wang Ming laughed, and then several people began to feast on the food. Shen Yu's cooking skills are really amazing. Before, when I was in Heart-Beating Lovers, because I ate it often, I just felt that it was delicious, and there was no extra feeling. But after the recording of the program was completed, Wang Ming returned to Beijing and went to some 5-star restaurants. Although the dishes there were also very good, but he always felt that they were worse than those made by Shen Yu. Now after eating the dishes made by Shen Yu, he was immediately satisfied. This is the taste. I couldn't help it for a moment, and tasted all the dishes. I looked up and was about to praise Shen Yu for his superb cooking skills, but I saw Luo Ji holding a piece of 8 treasure duck on a plate and placing it in front of Shen Yu's mouth. Shen Yu didn't shy away and ate it directly. Luo Ji smiled happily when she saw Shen Yu eat it. After seeing this scene, Wang Ming was like a fool, with his mouth wide open, staring at the 2 of them blankly, his eyes full of disbelief. His brain was even more confused. He shook his head and felt a little suspicious. Is the alcohol content of this mousy so high, or has his alcohol tolerance become worse? How come he got drunk after drinking such a small cup? Then, he saw Luo Ji feeding Shen Yu again, but the difference was that the dish she picked up was pickled fish, sour, vegetable, and redundant pickled fish. Wang Ming reached his left hand under the table and pinched his thigh hard. After feeling a piercing pain, he realized that he was not drunk at all. The expression on his face became even more shocked. He looked at Shen Yu and asked impatiently, Old Shen, what's wrong with you? Chapter 112, First fight against foreign aggression, then stabilize the internal situation. Shen Yu showed him his right hand and said with a smile, The knuckles I used to sign a bookmark yesterday afternoon were swollen, and now I can't use chopsticks. Wang Ming was stunned when he heard this. Can I enjoy this treatment with a swollen hand? He couldn't help but look at his own hand. Then he looked at Su Jinyu, who was eating at the side. Suddenly he had a bold idea. Just then, Su Jinyu also followed Luo Ji's example and picked up a dish for Shen Yu. Shen Yu naturally did not refuse. After all, he had enjoyed it once last night. When Wang Ming saw this, the idea that had just arisen disappeared in an instant. He looked at Su Jinyu with bloodshot eyes and a shocked face. Luo Ji's behavior just now. He could barely understand it. After all, Luo Ji had publicly stated on the show that she liked Shen Yu for 3 years. If the two of them had some ambiguous scenes, it would be understandable. After all, there was a great chance that the two of them would be together. But he couldn't understand Su Jinyue's behavior. Luo Ji was right beside her, so it was a bit deliberate to do this. But Luo Ji and Shen Yu both looked normal. This really confused him. Seemingly seeing Huang Ming's doubts, Su Jinyu said unhappily, "What's so surprising? If Luo Ji feeds alone, then she won't eat it. Why are you making a fuss?" Hearing Su Jinyue's explanation, Huang Ming nodded subconsciously. It did make some sense. But the next second, he suddenly lowered his head and spat inwardly. What a bullshit. You should at least use a serving chopstick. If I hadn't used my own chopsticks, I could have convinced myself. It was obvious that she had taken a fancy to Shen Yu, and wanted to compete with Luo Ji. Only Shen Yu, a fool, could not see it. Huang Ming had already seen it in the last variety show. Huang Ming had a heavy heart during this meal. He drank a lot of wine, which was really depressing. After the meal, Huang Ming did not stay for long, mainly because he could not stay any longer. He contacted his agent early and took him back to his mansion. Shen Yu also drank a lot, and was dizzy at the moment. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu helped him to the bed. Then, they came to the dining table and cleaned up the mess. After cleaning the kitchen, the two girls sat on the sofa and chatted casually. At this time, Luo Ji suddenly looked at Su Jinyu and said, "Jinyu, let's discuss something." Su Jinyu was stunned for a moment when she heard it, and looked at Luo Ji with a serious face. Her heart suddenly paused, and an ominous feeling suddenly surged into her heart. Without waiting for Luo Ji to continue speaking, she said, "Let me make it clear first, I will not give up. As long as you two are not married, or I don't like Shen Yu anymore, I will dig this corner, just in case I succeed. I know you have liked him for 3 years, but my love is not cheap. You just knew him 3 years earlier than me. If it were me, I would not be worse than you." Hearing this, Luo Ji looked at her deeply, and after a long time, she said, "I met him for the first time in the midsummer 3 years ago. We worked together to shoot a microfilm. Since then, I have been attracted by this gentle boy. I was amazed at his talent when I first met him, and finally I was attracted by his personality. When I think of him involuntarily, I know I'm in love with him. He is as bright as the sun and as sudden as the clouds." After Luo Ji finished speaking, she smiled and looked at Su Jinyu, who was thinking, and said softly, "I'm not saying this to persuade you to give up. I know that when his talent begins to be realized, there will be many equally outstanding women who will surround him like moths to a flame. And Shen Yu is a person who is relatively slow in terms of feelings. I want to cooperate with you, and we will keep those beautiful women outside out, and then compete fairly. This is what I mean today." After hearing Luo Ji's words, Su Jinyu frowned slightly, her brain was working rapidly, thinking about the truth of Luo Ji's words. After a while, she finally made up her mind, looked up at Luo Ji and said, "Okay, I promise to form a temporary alliance with you, first to fight against foreign enemies and then to stabilize the country." Luo Ji heard this and smiled, "Happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. The day after tomorrow, we will record the program again. The first thing we need to do is Lin Feiwan." After hearing what Luo Ji said, Su Jinyu nodded in agreement. Lin Feiwan is indeed the biggest threat to them now. When Shen Yu regained consciousness, it was getting dark and thousands of lights were lit outside the window. Shen Yu rubbed his swollen head, and slowly sat up. Seeing a glass of water on the bedside table, he took it up and drank it all. His throat, which was dry and smoking, was relieved a lot. After adjusting himself, he walked out of the room. When he came out, Luo Ji and the other person who were chatting on the sofa immediately turned around. When they saw Shen Yu, they showed a concerned look. Luo Ji said with some concern, "How is it, are you still feeling uncomfortable?" Shen Yu shook his head and said with a smile, "I'm much better after a nap. I can't drink so much in the future." After Su Jinyu heard that Shen Yu was fine, she couldn't help but complain. "Don't drink so much. You'd better not drink anymore in the future. Don't you know your alcohol tolerance?" Hearing this, Shen Yu scratched his head awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Huang Ming came all the way from the capital and brought a bottle of good wine with him. It was really hard to refuse his kindness. Seeing this, Luoji patted Su Jinyu gently, then smiled and said, Ayu, I'll go to the kitchen to help you cook some porridge. Jinyu and I have already bought the ingredients in the afternoon. Then she stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Shen Yu wanted to help but she refused directly. Then Shen Yu poured himself a glass of water and sat on the sofa. Su Jinyu came up to him when she saw him. Shen Yu dodged and asked anxiously, What are you doing? Su Jinyu frowned slightly. I'm not going to eat you. What are you afraid of? I'm a girl and I didn't say anything. Su Jinyu complained for a while and then said, Shen Yu, when you were sleeping this afternoon, there were a few directors I had worked with before. They are also well known in the industry. They couldn't contact you and wanted to ask me for help to introduce them to buy the film and television adaptation rights of Gui Dingchue. Shen Yu frowned slightly when he heard this. He didn't expect that these people would come so quickly. Chapter 113 Kill the donkey after it has done its job and tear down the wall after crossing the river. This novel in the previous life. Because of some special reasons, the author lost the copyright of this novel. As a result, this golden IP worth billions of dollars has flooded the internet. Even the actors who play the protagonist Hubei can't be counted on one hand. Shen Yu naturally won't allow the same thing to happen again in this world. So for the time being, he hasn't decided whether to sell the film and television adaptation rights of Ghost Blowing Light. If he has time, he would like to do it himself. Let this tomb-raiding masterpiece bloom more brilliantly in this world. Shen Yu thought for a long time. Then shook his head and said, I don't plan to sell the film and television adaptation rights of Ghost Blowing Light for the time being. Please help me reject them. I'll talk about it when I want to sell it later. Su Jinyu nodded and said, Okay, I'll help you reject them later. After that, she looked at Shen Yu without blinking. Suddenly, an idea came to her mind. It was like a spark, and it set off a prairie fire in an instant. She looked at Shen Yu with some excitement and continued. Shen Yu, how about this? You also graduated from the directing department. Why don't you be a director yourself? And you are now the hottest male star in the entertainment industry. You are also very suitable to play Hubei. I will play Shirley Yan. The effect will definitely be very good. Shen Yu's heart moved when he heard this. But the next moment he shook his head and said, Let's talk about it later, forget it now, there is no time at all now. After hearing this, Su Jinyu did not persuade him anymore. There is really no time now, they will participate in the Love Variety Show again the day after tomorrow. Let's talk about this issue after the Love Variety Show is over. She has secretly made up her mind in her heart. She must pester Shen Yu to star in Ghost Blowing Light with her. Because Shen Yu's main development route now is in the music industry. Whether it is songs or piano music, she has nothing to do with it. There is no way, who made her born tone deaf. So Shen Yu could only be dragged into the film and television industry so that the two would have a common topic. After a while, Luoji came out with a bowl of fragrant millet and pumpkin porridge, put it on the table and said to Shen Yu, Come and drink this bowl of porridge, your stomach will feel better. Shen Yu immediately stood up and came to the table. Looking at the fragrant millet and pumpkin porridge, he smiled and said, Thank you, Luoji. You have something else to say to me. Luoji sat opposite Shen Yu and looked at him tenderly. Su Jinyu also came up at this time. After smelling the fragrance, she couldn't help swallowing her saliva. Luoji saw this and said with a smile, You greedy cat, there's more in the kitchen, go get it yourself. Su Jinyu's eyes lit up when she heard this. Ran into the kitchen, and soon came out with a bowl of millet and pumpkin porridge. Sat down beside Shen Yu and began to eat heartily. Shen Yu saw this and couldn't help but tease. Jinyu, why are you still eating? Aren't you afraid of getting fat? You are different from me. You are a movie queen and a screen goddess. Su Jinyu rolled her eyes at him with some disdain and said contemptuously, You don't know this, sister, I exercise every day, so I won't get fat. After that, she picked up the spoon and started to drink the porridge. The moment she ate, a flash of shock flashed across her eyes. She looked at Luoji with some surprise and said, Luoji, your cooking skills are so good. This porridge is delicious. Luoji smiled and explained, I usually live alone most of the time. Over time, I learned cooking skills. My cooking skills are incomparable to Shen Yu's. It's also very good. With this skill, you can open a store. After drinking the porridge, Luoji helped Shen Yu apply the ointment on his right hand again. The three of them sat on the sofa and chatted for a while. Su Jinyu got up and went home. Now Luoji is Shen Yu's real girlfriend. She can't stay here all the time, so she can only go home today. After Su Jinyu left, Luoji completely relaxed. She carefully took off her slippers, revealing a pair of petite and delicate feet. Her toes were as white and flawless as pearls, perfect like a work of art. Then she gently lay on Shen Yu's legs, just staring at him. Seeing this, Shen Yu gently pinched her small nose and said with a smile, "What are you looking at?" "Looking at you. After looking at me for so long, don't you feel some visual fatigue?" "No, I can't see enough." Seeing this, Shen Yu gently exerted force with both hands, picked up Luoji and put her in his arms, and said with a smile, "Then look slowly, I'm always here." Luoji snuggled on Shen Yu's chest. Listening to Shen Yu's strong heartbeat, her face was full of happiness. "I don't know how long it took." Luoji looked up at Shen Yu and said, "Let's change a house later." Shen Yu heard it and nodded. "Okay, this house is indeed a little small." When he bought this house, Gui Chualeng had just started to make his first pot of gold. He could afford it in the Magic City, and such a house. He had already done his best. But now it seems a little small. It's like there's no way to stay when friends want to stay. After hearing Shen Yu's agreement, Luoji smiled happily. In fact, she wanted to change a house with Shen Yu not only because of this. Another reason is that this is the wedding room of Shen Yu and Lin Feiwan. Since Lin Feiwan visited her suddenly without saying hello last time, she had this idea. Then let's go pick a house together after the recording of this love variety show is finished. Okay, I'll listen to you. When she thought about choosing a new house, Luoji couldn't wait to go tomorrow. A trace of resentment surged in her heart. I don't know what Mengde thinks. I told him that we are in love, but he insisted that we participate in another episode. I will never agree to him next time. Shen Yu stroked her hair and said with a smile, "Help him finish this episode, so that it can be regarded as a beginning and an end, otherwise it will be difficult to report to this guy." Hearing what Shen Yu said, Luoji stopped talking. At this time, Mengde, who was busy in Lucheng, suddenly sneezed twice, rubbed his nose, and thought to himself, who was secretly scolding him again. If he had heard Luoji's complaints just now, he would probably be furious. Before, when he gave Luoji advice and let her live in Shen Yu's house, Luoji didn't say that. After making Lin Feiwan angry and leaving, she praised him as Zhuge Liang, who was able to predict the future. Now that she is with Shen Yu, she has begun to abandon him without caring about his life or death. Chapter 114 Letting one sheep go is like letting a flock of sheep go. Early the next morning, Shen Yu got up early as usual and started his morning run. When he was halfway through his run, the phone in his pocket suddenly rang. Shen Yu had to slow down and answer the call. As soon as the call was connected, a familiar voice came from the microphone. "Shen Yu, it's me, Ji Shuyi." At the end of the first episode of Heart-Beating Lovers, several people also exchanged contact information, and Shen Yu naturally knew that it was Ji Shuyi's call. "What's wrong? Is there anything, Shuyi?" "It's like this, I was also entrusted by someone. The person in charge of the two music platforms, Kugu and Penguin, wants to invite you to discuss cooperation. I don't know if you have time." "Of course, it's all up to you. I'm just a messenger." Just when Ji Shuyi made this call, the negotiation team of Kugu and Penguin had already arrived in the Magic City. The real business war is not about cutting off the capital chain or arranging spies. At the beginning of the incident, Wang Mani, the director of the copyright department of NetEase, released a night view of Lu Jiazu in Shanghai, which immediately attracted the attention of the relevant persons in charge of Penguin and Crying Dog. You know, Wang Mani is a real Yangjing girl. She must have only one reason to come to Shanghai, that is work. As the director of the copyright department of NetEase, there are not many singers or creators who can let her personally take action. They don't need to think too much, they can think of Shen Yu, the hottest chicken on the internet recently. When they thought that NetEase had already taken action, the two companies couldn't sit still. They immediately bought tickets to Shanghai overnight and prepared to start intercepting. At the same time, they kept looking for ways to contact Shen Yu. I don't know if it was telepathy or something, but the two parties actually contacted Ji Shuyi at the same time. After all, Ji Shuyi is also a person in the music industry and is considered an acquaintance of theirs. Finally, that's how Ji Shuyi called. After hearing what Ji Shuyi said, Shen Yu pondered for a moment, smiling. Then asked them to come to the Blue Mountain Cafe at 10 a.m., whether it's one sheep or a flock of sheep. Hearing this, Ji Shuyi immediately said, "Thank you, Shen Yu, I'll contact them now." Then he hung up the phone in a hurry. After putting the phone back in his pocket, Shen Yu continued his morning run today. Then, he returned home with 3 breakfasts. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Su Jinyu sitting on the sofa. Luo Ji was wearing pajamas and looked sleepy. You could tell at a glance that she was pulled up by Su Jinyu. Shen Yu put the breakfast on the table. "You two should have breakfast first, I'll go wash up." He walked straight to the bathroom. After a while, Shen Yu, who had changed into clean clothes, returned to the dining table, picked up the breakfast on the table, and began to eat heartily. At the table, Shen Yu directly told Ji Shuyi about the phone call just now. The two girls bowed their heads and pondered after hearing this. Luo Ji smiled and said, "This is good. With the comparison, we can see more intuitively which platform is more sincere." Su Jinyu on the side also nodded and said, "Yes, it's good to have a comparison, but Penguin's reputation seems to be a bit bad, you should pay more attention to it." Shen Yu nodded. "I will be more careful later, Jinyu, lend me your car later." Su Jinyu was stunned for a moment after hearing this. "What do you mean, you won't take me?" Shen Yu smiled and said, "You also want to go to this boring business negotiation?" As soon as the voice fell, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu kept nodding. Looking at the two nodding children, Shen Yu couldn't help but smile and said, "Okay, let's go together." After finishing the meal, the 3 of them took a short break and left home and drove towards the Blue Mountain Cafe. At the entrance of Blue Mountain Cafe, the negotiation team of Kugu and Penguin was already in place. At this time, a woman in a light blue high-end suit, holding her expensive brand name bag, got out of the car. It was Wang Mani. As soon as she got out of the car, she saw the 2 distinct teams at the entrance of the cafe. Wang Mani's mood, which was originally quite good, suddenly became gloomy. She cursed in her heart that these 2 people really had dog noses. They came here just after she arrived. Although she was very unhappy in her heart, she did not show it on her face. She walked up with a smile and greeted them enthusiastically. "Lao Zhang, Lao Li, why are you 2 here too?" The person in charge of Kugu and Penguin also came up to Wang Mani after seeing her. She smiled and said, "Whatever you, Minister Wang, are doing here, we will do the same thing." Wang Mani was shocked. These 2 guys really got the news. He asked in confusion, "You 2 have a good nose." Zhang Ping, the person in charge of Kugu, smiled and said, "We have to thank you, Minister Wang. If it weren't for you, we would have fallen behind this time. Anyone who can reach Wang Mani's position can't be a fool." After a little thought, she understood what Zhang Ping said just now. "I immediately understood that. The problem was the night view of Lujiazu that she posted last night." When she thought of this, Wang Mani wanted to slap herself. Why did she post a circle of friends on a whim last night and make such a low-level mistake? When she thought that the 2 families were recruited by herself, she felt bad. But she couldn't show it at the moment, and she wanted to cry but had no tears. When it was almost 10 o'clock, Su Jinyu drove Shen Yu and Luo Ji to the parking lot in front of the Blue Mountain Coffee Shop. After parking the car, the 3 got off and went to the Blue Mountain Coffee Shop. As soon as the 3 of them walked past the car, they were spotted by the sharp-eyed Wang Mani. They immediately trotted over, smiled and stretched out their hands and said, "Teacher Shen, the private room is ready, let's go in." Shen Yu smiled and shook hands with her and said, "Sorry to bother you, Minister Wang, I must have waited for a long time. I just arrived not long ago, let me introduce you to the 2 leaders of Crying Dog and Penguin." In fact, after seeing Wang Mani's actions, Zhang Ping and Li Shuang also quickly understood that it was Shen Yu who arrived. However, they were not familiar with Shen Yu, so they could only follow behind Wang Mani and introduce themselves after she finished the greetings. After Shen Yu shook hands with the 2 of them and said hello, the group walked into the coffee shop. Fortunately, the private room they chose was relatively large, otherwise it might not be able to accommodate so many people. After Shen Yu sat down, he got straight to the point. The companies behind the three of you are all giants in the domestic music platform. I want to hear what kind of treatment you can give me. Zhang Ping smiled and said, Mr. Shen is really a quick-witted person. Chapter 115 Signing completed. Afterwards, Zhang Ping saw Li Shuang and Wang Mani sitting on the sofa and drinking coffee leisurely, without any intention of speaking first. He cursed in his heart that they were all old foxes. Speaking first was tantamount to exposing his own cards first. Unless the treatment he gave was good enough. Otherwise, Li Shuang and Wang Mani were not vegetarians. Two hungry wolves who took advantage of others to spit out bones. Although he was the person in charge of the copyright of Kuvu, the funds he could mobilize were also limited. But now he was on a fire, and he had no choice but to say it. Then, he smiled and looked at Shen Yu and said, Mr. Shen, we have prepared 2 contracts. Let me talk about the first one first. Shen Yu nodded and smiled and made a gesture of invitation. Zhang Ping saw this and said, Our company wants to buy out the copyrights of your songs at a price of 10 million per song, and the revenue sharing of the songs is still 50-50. Shen Yu frowned slightly when he heard this. He was unwilling to sell the copyrights of his songs. You know, once the copyright is sold, he will not be able to control his own songs. Even if he wants to sing, he has to pay the copyright fee. This is unacceptable to him. After Zhang Ping finished speaking, he immediately waved his hand and said, Thank you for your company's love, but I will not sell the copyrights of my songs. Sorry. Hearing Shen Yu's words, not only Zhang Ping, but also Li Shuang and Wang Mani beside him, they all sighed in their hearts. You know, the copyright of songs is extremely important, especially good songs. If they can buy the copyright of these songs, with a little operation, they can definitely get at least 5 times the profit. You know, when the profit reaches 10%, some people are ready to move. When the profit reaches 50%, some people dare to take risks. When the profit reaches 100%, they dare to trample on all human laws. When the profit reaches 300%, they are not afraid even if they risk going to the gallows. After seeing Shen Yu's firm refusal, Zhang Ping had to continue. Mr. Shen, another plan is that we are willing to pay 5 million per song to buy the exclusive broadcasting rights, reproduction rights and information network dissemination rights of your current songs, and the revenue sharing of the songs will remain unchanged. Shen Yu heard this. He was quite satisfied in his heart. This way the copyright is also in his hands. It's nothing more than putting these songs on the Kuvu music platform. He nodded, then looked at Li Shuang and said, Minister Li, what kind of treatment can Penguin give me? Li Shuang heard this and said with a smile, Mr. Shen, you just said that you would not sell the copyright of the songs. What if our company is willing to buy them at a price of 30 million per song? Shen Yu still shook his head and said, Minister Li, you misunderstood. I refused not because of the price. I am not short of money now, right? Li Shuang chuckled after hearing this, and did not continue the topic. He continued, we Penguin are willing to bid 20 million per song to purchase the exclusive broadcasting rights, reproduction rights and information network dissemination rights of these songs from you now, and the income from the songs will be divided 50-50. As soon as their voice fell, not only Shen Yuban, but also Luo Ji, Su Jinyu, and even Wang Mani and others looked at Li Shuang with shock. They didn't expect that Li Shuang would offer such generous conditions. Wang Mani frowned, her mind was already working rapidly. This price was even higher than she had expected at the beginning. However, Shen Yu was not overwhelmed by the high price. He looked at Li Shuang and said, Minister Li should have other conditions. Li Shuang looked at Shen Yu with some surprise and said with a smile, Mr. Shen is indeed a first-class smart man. There is indeed an ancillary contract. Our company is willing to pay 50 million. As long as you guarantee that within 5 years, all the songs you release will be on our Penguin platform, but the number of songs released each year is not less than 5. Hearing Li Shuang's words, Shen Yu did not speak immediately, but fell into thinking. To be fair, he was not familiar with the 3 major music giants in China. So it was understandable that the songs were placed on any platform. And this number of songs per year was no threat to him. He had the world's music library. Although he was somewhat tempted at this time, he still wanted to listen to Wang Mani's offer before making a decision. After hearing Li Shuang's additional contract, Wang Mani's heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally let go. Just now, she really thought she had no hope. Seeing Shen Yu's gaze, she smiled and said, "Teacher Shen, we at NetEase are willing to pay 10 million per song for the right to disseminate information on the internet. At the same time, we are willing to pay 20 million per year and invite you to publish all the songs you create in the future on NetEase. The contract can be signed for 1 year. We don't have any requirements for the number of songs. Even if you have no inspiration this year and have not released a single song, we are still willing to pay 20 million." As soon as she finished speaking, Wang Mani picked up the coffee on the table and drank it slowly. At this time, she looked relaxed. Although the conditions she offered were not the best in price, they must be the least restrictive. She believed that Shen Yu would definitely choose her company. As expected, Shen Yu was very interested after hearing this condition. This is indeed the most relaxed contract. Even Luo Ji and Su Jinyu beside him were fond of this contract. Especially the one that does not limit the number of songs, they agreed very much. After all, creation requires inspiration. They didn't know that Shen Yu had a world in his mind. If Shen Yu ran out of inspiration one day, if he couldn't create, he would have to pay a large amount of liquidated damages. Shen Yu thought for a while, then exchanged glances with Luo Ji and Su Jinyu. Then he looked at Wang Mani and said with a smile, "Minister Wang, your company is really sincere, and I really can't refuse it." When Wang Mani heard it, she knew she had succeeded. And she smiled immediately. "Teacher Shen, our company has always spared no effort for top talents like you. I hope that we can join forces and push the Chinese music scene to a higher peak. I am looking forward to working with your company." Then, Wang Mani struck while the iron was hot and took out 2 contracts. One was to purchase the information dissemination rights of the previous songs, etc. The other contract required Shen Yu to only publish works on NetEase within 1 year. Shen Yu read the contract carefully. And then Luo Ji and Su Jinyu also checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, Shen Yu picked up the pen and signed his name. Chapter 116. Today, all the consumption will be paid by Mr. Shen. After seeing Shen Yu sign the contract with NetEase, Zhang Ping and Li Shuang couldn't help but sigh. However, they didn't have any complaints. It was because their company's treatment was not as good as others. Since Shen Yu had already signed the contract with NetEase, there was no need for them to stay. Then, they said hello to Shen Yu and left the cafe. Shen Yu signed all the contracts. Wang Mani checked them and found no problems. After carefully putting away the contracts, she stood up with a smile on her face and stretched out her hand to the remaining staff. "Teacher Shen, we have a pleasant cooperation. Happy cooperation. There is still time. How about you do us a favor and have lunch together?" Shen Yu glanced at the time. It was not yet 11 o'clock. He declined politely. "How about next time? We came here after breakfast and are not very hungry now." Wang Mani did not force him. "That's fine. If you go to Beijing later, you must contact me. I will take you to visit Beijing." Shen Yu naturally agreed. Then the 4 of them walked out of the coffee shop together. Just after saying goodbye, Wang Mani suddenly thought of something and hurriedly called Shen Yu, "Mr. Shen, NetEase basically has its own recording studios in major cities across the country. You have the highest authority and can use them at any time." Shen Yu heard this and thanked Wang Mani again before leaving. After returning to the car, Su Jinyu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Just now when she was in the coffee shop, she couldn't help but want to scream out loud, but she was so depressed. She turned to look at Shen Yu and said, "You made 70 million in just half an hour." Shen Yu shook the contract in his hand and said with a smile, "It's genuine. If I had known, I wouldn't have filmed. It would have been great to learn singing. It would be so easy to make money." Hearing this, Shen Yu couldn't help but complain. "I think being an actor is the best choice for you. If you were a singer, you might still be starving now." Shen Yu. Su Jinyu was furious when she heard Shen Yu's ridicule. Shen Yu quickly admitted his mistake. Luo Ji rolled her eyes at Shen Yu lightly. Knowing that Jinyu was more sensitive about this, he still rubbed salt into her wounds every day. He was very mean. She looked at Luo Ji and said, "Okay, don't be angry anymore. Shen Yu has made so much money now. Let him treat us to a meal and let him eat well." Su Jinyu heard this and gritted her teeth and said, Let's go to Lujiazu. I'm going to eat until Shen Yu bleeds. Luoji said with a smile. Let's go shopping first and let Shen Yu pay for it. After hearing this, Su Jinyue's face was full of hesitation and struggle. Although she usually behaved very actively and liked Luoji, she still knew the importance of things. Luoji is now Shen Yu's real girlfriend. It's normal for her to spend Shen Yu's money. But if it were her, it would be inappropriate. This is not good. When Luoji saw Su Jinyu say this, there was a little more satisfaction in her eyes. She smiled even more happily. What's wrong with that? Shen Yu made so much money today, he should reward us. Shen Yu also made a timely statement at this time. Mr. Shen will pay for all their consumption today. Su Jinyu was originally hesitating. When she heard Luoji and Shen Yu say this, she immediately agreed with a smile. Then the three of them set off for Lujiazu. When they first started shopping, Shen Yu was still quite comfortable. But as time passed, Shen Yu gradually found something wrong. After Luoji and Su Jinyu entered the mall, they almost wandered around from store to store. But they didn't buy anything. Shen Yu couldn't help it, so he said, "Don't you like anything? Don't you like that dress?" Luoji and Su Jinyu rolled their eyes at Shen Yu. They said in unison, "Don't mind women's business." As if they didn't expect that the other party would say the same thing. The two women looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Then the two continued to do their own thing, just shopping but not buying. After 2 hours of shopping, Shen Yu's legs were numb. He looked at the two people who were still excited and walking fast. And his heart was full of doubts. For the first time, he questioned his exercise every morning. He was already exhausted and out of breath. And those two people were like nothing happened, and it seemed that they could shop for several more hours. Seeing that it was already noon, Shen Yu hurriedly said, "Two beauties, why don't we have lunch first and then continue shopping?" Looking at Shen Yu, whose forehead was already soaked with fine sweat, Luoji couldn't help but feel distressed and said, "Then let's have lunch first. Jin Yu, what do you want to eat?" Su Jinyu pondered for a while before speaking. There is a French restaurant upstairs, the taste is not bad, and the environment is relatively quiet. Why don't we go there? Luoji turned to look at Shen Yu. Shen Yu immediately smiled and said, "You decide, I can eat anything." He just wanted to end this damn shopping now, and it didn't matter what to eat. Seeing this, Luoji smiled and said, "Then let's eat this French restaurant." Then, under the leadership of Su Jinyu, the three walked into this French restaurant. As soon as he entered the restaurant, Shen Yu nodded after seeing the decoration inside. This restaurant recommended by Su Jinyu, the overall decoration looks very good, flying spires, delicate sculptures, wishing fountains, antique pianos. The whole restaurant is full of French style, dim lights and piano performances, and the atmosphere is full. There are not many tables inside, at most a dozen tables, which guarantees the physical and mental pleasure of customers. As soon as the three came in, a woman in work clothes and a beautiful figure came up to them and led them to a table with a good view. Then she handed over the menu. Su Jinyu had been walking around the street for 2 hours, but she still didn't forget her original plan. She ordered a lot of expensive signature dishes without hesitation, and then looked at Shen Yu proudly. Shen Yu was also amused by her appearance. At this time, after seeing the meals ordered by the three people, the staff hesitated for a moment, and then whispered, "Sir, why don't you remove some dishes? This is a bit too much, you probably can't finish it." Shen Yu heard this, took a closer look at this kind-hearted staff, and said with a smile, "It's okay, I have always had a good appetite, you can ask the chef to do it." The woman nodded and turned away. She had already advised, and since the customer insisted, she would not go to offend him again. Chapter 117: A Day of Suffering. Because they had to go shopping later, Su Jinyu did not order any wine. As for whether it had anything to do with Shen Yu's inability to hold his liquor, I am not sure. In fact, authentic French food is served very slowly. France is famous for its romance and is passionate about romance. What matters is a sense of ritual. It often takes at least 3 hours to eat an authentic French meal in a French restaurant. Eating is very particular. But it is different in China. People in our country do not have much patience to wait for such a long time. So French food in China is also accelerated. After a while, the cold dishes of the appetizers were served. Shen Yu and the other two were already hungry. They ate without hesitation. After 2 days of rest, Shen Yu's hand was almost healed. It was no problem for him to eat by himself. Because they were outside, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu behaved very elegantly this time, but they ate very fast. Before, the staff who kindly reminded Shen Yu to remove a few dishes saw Shen Yu finish a whole steak easily, and then naturally moved another one. She immediately understood that Shen Yu was not unwilling to listen to her advice, but that he really had a big appetite. However, when she looked at Shen Yu's face, she always felt that he looked familiar, but she just couldn't remember where she had seen him. And she also felt familiar with the other lady, but she couldn't remember it after recalling it for a long time, and immediately forgot about it. Maybe she was an old customer. The meal took more than an hour, and Shen Yu finally filled his stomach. Later, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu had already stopped, and Shen Yu was the only one who was still eating crazily to replenish the energy consumed by shopping in the morning. Even the meal Su Jinyu ordered was not enough. And she added 2 more main dishes to fill her stomach successfully. After finishing the meal, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu continued to go shopping excitedly. In the French restaurant, after the staff member cleaned the table, then came to the lounge to take a break. At this time, a colleague in the lounge was holding a mobile phone with a crazy look on his face. After seeing her come in, he smiled and said, "Shen Yu is really handsome, especially his peach blossom eyes." When the woman heard this, her body was shocked. She finally remembered who the man looked like just now. Thinking of this, she put her head in front of her colleague's mobile phone. And sure enough, he looked exactly like the man just now. At the same time, she also remembered who the familiar woman was. Wasn't it the popular actress Su Jinyu now? When she thought of this, she looked at her colleague who was infatuated with her and said stutteringly, I just saw Shen Yu in the mall." Luo Ji and Su Jinyu changed their state in the morning and walked straight to a store. After entering, Shen Yu was still the same as before, wandering around in the store. But this time he was not spared. After a few minutes, he was caught by Luo Ji directly. Then Su Jinyu picked up a few clothes and tried them on him. Seeing this, Shen Yu's face suddenly changed. The last time he watched the new book release conference, the shadow of the two forcing him to try on clothes has not yet passed. Seeing the two eager to try, Shen Yu quickly said, "Well, I have a lot of clothes at home, you should buy them for yourselves." The two ignored Shen Yu's words, and directly stuffed the clothes into Shen Yu's hands and said, "Go to the fitting room to try them on." Shen Yu wanted to save him again, but he saw 2 pairs of fierce eyes, and he immediately became timid and went to the fitting room to change clothes. When Shen Yu came out again, the two of them were suddenly brightened. Usually Shen Yu wore a large round neck short-sleeved shirt with shorts, but now he put on a casual shirt carefully selected by Luo Ji and the others, and his already tall body looked even more energetic. In addition, he insisted on jogging every morning. Unlike those who ate protein powder to build dead muscles, his muscle lines were faintly visible under his clothes. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu were immediately stunned. Even the staff on the side were stunned. They rarely saw a man with such a good figure, appearance and temperament. They were all excited. If he hadn't been accompanied by 2 women with excellent temperament, although they were wearing masks, they could still see that they were definitely top beauties. The small cards in their pockets had been stuffed into Shen Yu's pocket. After a long while, Luo Ji came back to her senses. After circling Shen Yu, she exclaimed, "Ayu, you look really good in this outfit. Wear it like this in the future." Su Jinyu on the side nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Shen Yu heard this and said with some resistance, "I still think that my previous clothes are more comfortable to wear." After hearing this, Luo Ji glared at Shen Yu and said, "I'll go back and throw away your clothes." After that, she excitedly pulled Su Jinyu and continued to pick clothes. They were very satisfied with the clothes they had just picked for Shen Yu. So they naturally had to pick a few more sets. Who doesn't like the cultivation system? After a while, Shen Yu looked at the pile of clothes in front of him and wanted to cry but had no tears. When the 3 of them returned home, the sun was about to set, and the sunset in the sky was extremely dazzling. But Shen Yu at this time no longer had the energy to appreciate the beautiful scenery. At this time, he was struggling to carry dozens of packaging bags in his hands, most of which were the clothes Luo Ji and Su Jinyu had picked for him. And a small part was bought by the two for him. After returning home, Shen Yu put down the packaging bag and lay directly on the sofa panting. Seeing this, Luo Ji came over and sat next to him. She smiled and said, "Are you so tired?" Shen Yu shook his hand and said with emotion, "You girls are really weird. You are too tired to walk after walking a few thousand steps on weekdays. Why do you feel like you have taken a tonic pill when you go shopping?" Su Jinyu poured a glass of water for the three of them, sat next to Luo Ji and said, "You don't understand, this is the charm of shopping. We will be happy when we go shopping and don't feel tired." Shen Yu said nothing when he heard it, and silently raised his thumb. In fact, it was not just Shen Yu. After the excitement, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu were also exhausted. After all, they did not have the physique of Shen Yu. They only felt their legs were extremely sore and they did not even have the strength to lift them up. They curled up on the sofa and groaned. Seeing this, Shen Yu immediately found it a little funny. However, seeing Luo Ji and Su Jinyu frowning from time to time, he still took the initiative to ask Luo Ji, who was standing beside him, "I know a little massage. Do you want me to help you?" Chapter 118 Don't Shout. Hearing Shen Yu's words, Luo Ji's face suddenly turned red. She carefully glanced at Su Jinyu beside her, then turned her head and rolled her eyes at Shen Yu. "This guy. Can't you wait until Su Jinyu leaves before talking?" She felt a little embarrassed that Su Jinyu was here. Shen Yu thought Luo Ji didn't believe in her skills, and hurriedly explained, "My skills are very good, and the effect is absolutely immediate. After the massage, the pain in your legs and feet will be relieved a lot." Seeing that Shen Yu had misunderstood her meaning, Luo Ji had no choice but to hum softly. Her voice was as light as a mosquito. If Shen Yu hadn't been sitting next to her and had good hearing, he might not have heard it. Then, Shen Yu stood up and said while moving his palms, "Lie down on the sofa." Just now, Luo Ji did not believe him. So he planned to use all his strength to let Luo Ji experience his skills. After hearing this, Luo Ji obediently lay down on the sofa and took a sofa cushion and put it under her head. Luo Ji was wearing a pair of off-white silk trousers today. Shen Yu put his hand on Luo Ji's calf and immediately felt a soft and delicate touch, and his heart was immediately stirred. Luo Ji was also uncomfortable at this time. After Shen Yu's warm hands were placed on her legs, Luo Ji's body shook violently, and the whole person froze in place. And as Shen Yu's hands began to knead, a tingling feeling quickly spread from Shen Yu's hands and spread all over her body. Luo Ji almost subconsciously wanted to scream, but thinking of Su Jinyu still beside her, driven by the little consciousness left, she quickly covered her mouth with her hands to avoid making those indecent sounds. And her face was red as if it was about to bleed. After a while, Luo Ji only felt that the soreness in her legs was less than when she just came back. In excitement, she relaxed her mind for a while. Just at this time, Shen Yu started a new round of massage. Luo Ji couldn't help but hummed. Almost instantly, the whole living room fell into a dead silence. Luo Ji was ashamed to death, buried her head deeply in the pillow and dared not see anyone. Shen Yu paused for a moment, and her heart was like being scratched by a cat's claws. But in the end, she pretended not to hear and continued to massage. But Su Jinyu on the side was different. Since Shen Yu started to massage, her attention had been on the two of them. Hearing Luo Ji's hum, her face flushed slightly. She cursed Luo Ji in her heart. It was just a massage, but she made such a noise. If you didn't know, you would think she was doing something inappropriate for children. But even though she complained, her big, watery eyes were fixed on the two of them and she couldn't move them away. Luo Ji could do this, which showed that Shen Yu's massage skills were not bad. When she thought of her legs being very sore, she had some thoughts in her mind. Soon, Shen Yu finished massaging Luo Ji. He patted Luo Ji's calf gently and said with a smile, "How is it?" "It's a lot easier, right?" Luo Ji also recovered from her shyness at this time. Although her face was still slightly red, she raised her head and whispered, "It's indeed a lot easier. It's not as painful as before." Su Jinyu, who was standing beside him, heard this and said quickly, "I want it too. My legs are so sore. Shen Yu, help me too." She lay down consciously after saying this. Hearing Su Jinyu's words, Luo Ji showed an expression that she had seen through it long ago. As expected, Su Jinyu couldn't sit still after seeing Shen Yu massaging her. However, the two of them still have a common goal now, so she didn't say anything. Shen Yu looked at Su Jinyu and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Unlike Luo Ji, Su Jinyu was wearing a pair of hot pants today. Her two slender and hot thighs were exposed to the air. They looked particularly white under the light, like carefully carved jade. Shen Yu couldn't help but look embarrassed and turned to look at Luo Ji. After Luo Ji saw Shen Yu's inquiring eyes, the bitterness in her heart suddenly dissipated a lot. It seems that she still has a very important position in Shen Yu's heart. She said helplessly, "Give Jinyu a massage too. She will go to participate in the show tomorrow. Don't be unable to walk by then." Shen Yu thought about it for a while before nodding. He came to Su Jinyu's side and put his hands on her white and smooth calves. The moment Shen Yu put his hands on her, Su Jinyu trembled as if she was electrocuted. As Shen Yu began to massage, Su Jinyu finally understood why Luo Ji made such a sound. However, she did not have the same concentration as Luo Ji. After a while, she was a little overwhelmed and hummed intermittently. Seeing this, Luo Ji could not help but secretly curse Su Jinyu, a bitch, for not being able to control herself. Shen Yu was also a little distracted by the sound. He could not help but pat her calf. "Don't shout." Su Jinyu quickly covered her mouth with both hands, and her face turned red. After Shen Yu finished the massage, the three of them breathed a sigh of relief in unison. It was really a test. After the massage, Su Jinyu felt that the pain in her legs was only 1/10 of what it was now. She said excitedly, "Shen Yu, your massage skills are so good. Have you practiced it?" Shen Yu's face darkened when he heard this, and he said nothing. Lin Feiwan's mother had some old problems with her waist before, so he found a master and learned massage from him for a few days. He had a strong understanding and reached the level of ordinary people in a few days. He felt a little chilled when he thought of what Lin's mother did to him later. Seeing Shen Yu suddenly silent, with a look of disappointment on his face, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu both became nervous immediately. Su Jinyu even started to apologize directly. "I'm sorry Shen Yu, am I?" Before he finished speaking, Shen Yu came back to his senses and said with a smile, "It has nothing to do with you, I was distracted just now, and I just remembered some past events, don't get me wrong." The two girls were relieved after hearing this. Then the three of them sat and chatted for a while. Su Jinyu returned to her home with the shopping bags she bought for herself today. She will participate in the dating variety show again tomorrow. She will naturally stay with her parents for a while tonight. Besides, her luggage has not been packed yet. After hearing the door closing, Shen Yu directly hugged Luo Ji to his lap and looked at her straight. Luo Ji saw Shen Yu's fiery eyes. The redness on her face that had faded away returned again. Looking at Shen Yu's face approaching, she closed her eyes shyly. Chapter 119 Arrival in Luchun. The next morning, Shen Yu woke up early, opened the curtains, looking refreshed, then got dressed and started his daily morning run. When Shen Yu came back with breakfast, he didn't see Su Jinyu. But Shen Yu was not surprised, as he was leaving for the love show today. It was normal for Su Jinyu to spend more time with her parents, although she bought breakfast for 3 people. But with Su Jinyu's small stomach, she finished her breakfast in 2 bites. After taking a shower in the bathroom, she knocked on Luo Ji's door. After a while, Luo Ji came out in pajamas, sleepy-eyed. After seeing Shen Yu, her face flushed instantly. She avoided his gaze and was a little afraid to look at Shen Yu. Shen Yu smiled and said, "Go wash up quickly, let's have breakfast together." Luo Ji rolled her eyes at Shen Yu, then went into the bathroom and washed up. After dinner, the two began to pack their luggage. Just when they were almost done packing, Su Jinyu came in with her half-person high suitcase, opened the door and walked in a hurry. After seeing the two packing their luggage, she did not disturb them, and sat on the sofa and played with her mobile phone. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang suddenly. Su Jinyu ran over to open the door, and saw Huang Ming standing outside the door with a smile. Huang Ming was no longer surprised to see Su Jinyu here. The scene the day before yesterday had already greatly improved his psychological endurance. After seeing that it was Huang Ming, Su Jinyu smiled and said, "Old Huang, come in quickly. Luo Ji and Shen Yu haven't packed up yet." Hearing Su Jinyue's address, Wang Ming's forehead suddenly had several black lines. He said speechlessly, "Why call me old Huang? Call me brother Huang. I'm almost 30. Shen Yu can call me that, but I can't." Looking at Su Jinyu, who was righteous, Wang Ming gritted his teeth and pointed at her, not knowing what to say. Su Jinyu laughed when she saw this. "Okay, Huang, come in." Wang Ming's face suddenly showed a smile, and he said proudly, "That's right." After entering the house, Wang Ming shouted loudly, "Old Shen, haven't you packed yet?" Shen Yu heard Wang Ming's voice and said with a smile, "Old Wang, you are here, sit down and rest for a while, you will be ready soon." After a while, Luo Ji and Shen Yu came out. Shen Yu smiled and said, "Sorry, it's a little late to pack, let's go." In fact, Shen Yu had plenty of time. However, when eating, Shen Yu looked at Luo Ji's shy eyes and couldn't help himself. The two of them were so affectionate, "You fed me and I fed you," and they almost missed the time. Then the four of them carried their suitcases and walked out of the room. Wang Ming's agent had seen a nanny car waiting downstairs. When he saw the few people coming down, he hurried over to greet them. Wang Ming's agent was also well known in the circle, but he was not as famous as Shen Yu and the others. However, as Wang Ming's agent, Shen Yu and the others were very polite and gave him face. Then the few people got in the car and drove towards the airport. On the way, Wang Ming's agent Chen Feng knew that Shen Yu had no agent, and his mind became active. He couldn't help but look back at Shen Yu and said, "Teacher Shen, I see you don't have an agent team. I wonder if you are interested in our company." Shen Yu was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Thank you, I don't plan to sign a contract with the company yet. If I have this idea in the future, I will consider it." When Chen Feng wanted to say something else, Wang Ming immediately glared at him, and he stopped thinking. Shen Yu had already made it very clear just now. If he continued to talk like this, it might cause Shen Yu's disgust. At the same time, Wang Ming didn't want his relationship with Shen Yu to be mixed with these things. He has been in the entertainment industry for so long, and has seen all kinds of people. He is also very good at speaking to people in a human way and speaking to ghosts in a ghost way. But after meeting Shen Yu, this kind of casual teasing between the two made him let go of his long-lost vigilance and feel very relaxed. So he didn't want to break this harmony. After arriving at the airport, the four of them checked in their luggage first, sitting in the VIP lounge and waiting for a while. Then, under the guidance of the flight attendant, they began to board the plane. Now Mengda's heart-beating lover program is no longer the same as before. It is now the leading variety show in China. Advertisers are pouring in like rain, and the prices are not low. Mengda's wallet instantly bulged. The treatment of the guests is naturally much better. Without exception, the four of them booked first class. It takes about 3.5 hours to get from Shanghai to Luchun. After the four of them sat down, Su Jinyu put on headphones and eye masks and began to catch up on sleep. Last night, her mother nagged all night again, asking her to find a boyfriend quickly. Shen Yu and Luo Ji also took out a book and started reading it in sync. Wang Ming was originally thinking about chatting, but after seeing that none of the three had this idea, he put on headphones and started listening to music. When the four of them walked out of the airport, it was already past 1 in the afternoon. They had already eaten lunch on the plane. Some incidents happened in between, because they took off their masks. When the stewardess delivered the meal, she recognized Shen Yu and the others directly, and carefully asked them if they could take a photo together. Shen Yu and the others were naturally not the kind of stingy people. They were also very happy to meet fans. After giving their autographs and taking photos with the stewardesses, then they started to eat lunch. And the stewardesses who returned to the operation room looked at the photos on their phones, and their faces were full of excitement. The flight attendant couldn't help but remind them after seeing how excited they were. This time is an exception. Don't bother celebrities easily when you meet them in the future. Shen Yu has a good personality, so he didn't care. Once one of your senior sisters asked for a celebrity's autograph on the plane. She was complained about after getting off the plane. She was said to have disturbed the other person's rest. Finally, she was forced to resign. "I don't want you to end up like this." The smiles on the faces of several flight attendants faded a little after hearing this. They were even a little scared. Fortunately, it was Shen Yu who met them this time. At the exit of the airport. The staff of the program group had been waiting here for a long time. After seeing the four people, they hurriedly came to greet them. After seeing the staff of the program group, Shen Yu smiled and teased. Why didn't Lao Cao come? Now he is a big star and doesn't look down on us. Hearing Shen Yu's address to his leader. Even the surname was changed directly. They frantically suppressed the corners of their mouths that were raised. Chapter 1 21st Visit to Peach Blossom Island. The leading woman tried to suppress her smile and said, Director Meng is still busy now, so he sent us to pick him up at the airport. Shen Yu was just joking, and didn't mean anything else. Then the four of them got on the car prepared by the program group. More than half an hour later, the car drove to the Yalong Baipia. After getting off the car, Shen Yu and his companions looked around and said with some confusion, Are we there yet? The staff member who was traveling with them explained with a smile. Not yet, but we are going to take a speedboat now. Shen Yu understood immediately after hearing this, and said with a smile. Mengder is very generous this time, and he actually chose the island as the location. Then the four of them carried their luggage and boarded the speedboat under the guidance of the staff. Half an hour later, a small island appeared in front of the four people. After arriving at the dock, Mengder was already waiting not far away. After seeing the people, he excitedly came up to them. The past week was the happiest week for him in recent years. Because of Shen Yu's popularity, his love show became extremely popular. The advertisers and investors who had no intention of cooperating before, they almost called him these days. It was really painful and happy. After Shen Yu and his friends got off the boat, they saw the scenery on the island. And their eyes lit up. Shen Yu said with a smile. Lao Cao, where did you find this island? It looks great. Hearing this name, Mengder raised his head and a frown rose up. He looked at Shen Yu and whispered. Call me Lao Meng. I am the chief director of such a big program group after all. If it gets out, people will laugh at me. No problem, Lao Cao. Hearing this, Mengder looked at Shen Yu with a face full of resentment. He had no way to deal with Shen Yu, and answered Shen Yu's question with a frustrated look. This island is called Daohur Island, which is only 0.11 square kilometers. It is a private island. Wang Ming couldn't help but exclaimed. Mengder, you are so powerful in this circle, you even know the island owner. Mengder heard this and said with a wry smile. What island owner do I know? They agreed to let us rent it for a period of time just for Shen Yu's sake. We originally booked a seaside villa on Phoenix Island. When we came to discuss cooperation, they recognized our program team and agreed to rent the island to us after a chat. Shen Yu was a little stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect that his face was so big that he could rent a whole island. Afterwards, under the leadership of Mengder, everyone got on the sightseeing bus and came to the residence of this program team. Soon, Shen Yu and others were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. They stared with their eyes wide open. They saw a large villa right in front of them. Their whole villa was white, and it looked particularly pure against the blue sky. Wang Ming looked at the villa. Looked at Mengder in surprise. Meng, are we living here this time? Mengder nodded and said. We only have the right to use the first floor and the terrace on the top floor. The rest is considered a private area and cannot be entered. Mengder's words still did not affect the mood of several people. Even Shen Yu looked at the villa and couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. This is too luxurious. Although he regarded money as dirt, he was very happy to be able to rest in such a luxurious villa. Because it is a private island, there are still many security guards on the island. However, they have been notified and did not stop Shen Yu and others. After entering the first floor of the villa, everyone was attracted by the magnificent decoration inside. Especially the hall just after entering the door. The huge crystal chandelier hanging down attracted everyone's attention. Luxury, really too luxurious. Just this crystal chandelier, it can't be taken without tens of millions. Magic City is not far from Sanya. So the four of them were the first to arrive. After visiting the first floor of the villa, the four of them took the elevator to the terrace on the top floor. As soon as they walked out of the elevator, everyone was stunned by the scenery in front of them. Looking far away, there was an endless sea not far away. In the far distance, the sky and the coastline intertwined. The sea and the sky were one color, beautiful to the extreme. The warm sea breeze gently blew away the fatigue of Shen Yu and others from the long journey. Looking at the beautiful scenery in the distance, several people couldn't help but get drunk. After staying on the terrace for more than half an hour, several people returned to the first floor. Shen Yu looked at the beach not far away and couldn't help but suggest, "Why don't we choose a room first, put our luggage away, and then go to the beach? P.S. Yanzu, let's assume that this is a safe sea area. I'm from the inland, and I don't know much about islands. I rely on my imagination. Please don't criticize me." Hearing Shen Yu say this, Huang Ming and others were immediately excited, and they couldn't hold back. Then the four of them pulled their suitcases and began to choose their own rooms. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu chose an adjacent room and put the nameplate with their names on it next to the door. Shen Yu and Huang Ming chose the room opposite them. After the four put down their luggage, they walked out directly and prepared to set off for the beach. At this moment, Ju Ji suddenly came in with a suitcase. After seeing Shen Yu, she showed excitement on her face. She looked at Shen Yu and said, "Shen Yu, where are you going?" Shen Yu smiled and said, "We plan to go to the beach." Ju Ji heard this and her face was moved. She asked shyly, "Can I go with you?" "Why not? You can put your luggage in your room first and we will wait for you in the lobby." Ju Ji nodded heavily after hearing this. Then she pulled the huge suitcase that was half a person's height and trotted. Behind Shen Yu, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu looked at each other and saw vigilance in each other's eyes. 5 minutes later, Luo Ji trotted to the lobby and joined everyone. They didn't even have time to visit the villa. "Sorry, I kept you waiting. It's only a few minutes, let's go." It's only more than 10 minutes from the villa to the beach. Feeling the salty sea breeze, the 5 people are in a happier mood. At this time on the beach, the program team has prepared beds and sunshades in advance. Moreover, there are coconuts and other fruits on the table. When Su Jinyu saw it, she couldn't help it. "I want to drink coconut." She pulled Luo Ji to the table. The next second, she saw the green coconut and immediately looked embarrassed. Turning to Shen Yu and the others, "Shen Yu, brother Huang, can you open a coconut?" Huang Ming touched his head and smiled. "I can only drink coconut juice, not open a coconut." Shen Yu stepped forward and said with a smile, "There are always tools." Luo Ji looked around the table and handed over a kitchen knife. Chapter 121 Love Variety Show starts. Shen Yu took the kitchen knife, picked up a green coconut, put it on the table, opened it in no time, put a straw in it and handed it to Luo Ji. Then he opened one for everyone else at the same speed. So, the 5 of them sat on the bed, enjoying the salty sea breeze, drinking sweet coconut water, looking at the rolling sea not far ahead, feeling very comfortable. About half an hour later, a staff member of the program team hurried over, and his eyes lit up when he saw everyone. And he said quickly, "Teachers, Director Meng said the program has already started, and asked you to go over now." Shen Yu was surprised to hear that. "Are all the guests of the program team here?" Except for the 2 new teachers, all other teachers have already arrived at the villa. Shen Yu nodded when he heard that, and looked at Luo Ji and others and said, "Then let's go back, the program has already started." Hearing that, Su Jinyu looked regretful. "I just wanted to play beach volleyball for a while." Luo Ji smiled and said, "Let's go back first, there's plenty of time to play." Then the 5 of them set off towards the villa. In the villa at this time, Guan Mingzhi, Ji Shui and Shu Cai were already sitting on the sofa and greeting the audience in the live broadcast room. "Oh, it's finally on. Do you know how I've been spending this week? Where's my husband? Where did my husband go?" Shen Yu has already officially announced his relationship with our Luo Ji. Why is he still participating in this show? Shut up upstairs. If Shen Yu doesn't appear on the show, who should I watch? I think our Jin Yu and Shen Yu are a good match. I heard that there are 2 new guests. Do you know who they are? After a while, Shen Yu and his 5 companions walked in with a smile. When Ji Shui saw Shen Yu's dress, her eyes lit up. Shen Yu changed his previous dressing style this time. He wore a black shirt on his upper body. matched with a pair of suit pants and white shoes of the same color. He looked capable and elegant. She was originally a literary young woman. In addition to composing songs, she read books and traveled in her spare time, and practiced calligraphy. So when he saw Shen Yu dressed like this, his heart started beating like crazy. When Guanmingzhi saw Shen Yu and the others coming in, he immediately smiled and greeted them. "Brother Shen, Brother Huang, did you go to the beach to play?" Huang Ming replied with a smile, "Yes, let's go to the beach to play beach volleyball later." "That's fine, my major is suitable, and I chose volleyball as my physical education class in college." When Xu Cai saw Shen Yu and the others, he nodded slightly. He didn't have a good relationship with Shen Yu and the others, but of course there was no feud between them. As early as the end of the first episode, he had figured it out. Shen Yu was not someone he could touch. He only needed to lie down in this show and show his face when he had nothing to do. As for pairing with the female guests, having a sweet love or something, it had nothing to do with him. Ji Shui smiled and greeted Shen Yu. Although she was attracted to Shen Yu, for now, what she wanted to know most was the 2 poems Shen Yu gave to Luo Ji and Su Jinyu. She approached Luo Ji and Su Jinyu and asked in a low voice, "Luo Ji, Jinyu, can I see the poems Shen Yu wrote to you?" When Luo Ji and Su Jinyu heard this, they were embarrassed and kept silent. Luo Ji thought about it for a while, but still declined Ji Shuyi's request. "Sorry, Shuyi, I don't want to make public the poem Shen Yu gave me, please understand." Su Jinyu, who was standing by, nodded repeatedly. "Me too." Ji Shuyi sighed and said a little disappointedly, "It doesn't matter. If it were me, I probably wouldn't want to make it public either." After seeing Shen Yu and others come to the live broadcast room, the audience in the live broadcast room suddenly became excited. The bullet screen in the live broadcast room was like a pot of boiling water, almost filling up the entire screen, which shows how popular Shen Yu is. After Shen Yu sat down, Guanmingzhi could not wait to get in front of him, and said excitedly, "Brother Shen, you must sign an autograph for me later. I am a loyal fan of Ghost Blowing Light. You don't know that all of us in the dormitory are fans of your book. We are the kind of people who are not good at cooking and love to play. We dare not read it until we curl up in bed." Shen Yu said with a smile. "Okay, I will give you a few more when the time comes. You can give them to your roommates and thank them for their love for me." "Thank you so much, Brother Shen. I will take your autograph back and I will definitely gain a few adopted sons." As soon as Guanmingzhi said this, their whole audience laughed continuously. Except Guanmingzhi, everyone present has been working for many years. However, they also did such childish things when they were young. So when Guanmingzhi mentioned it, everyone's face was filled with nostalgia. At this moment, footsteps were heard at the door of the villa. Everyone immediately turned to look at the door, and then saw a beautiful woman wearing a simple white short-sleeved shirt and blue jeans, with big wavy hair, walking in with a huge suitcase. Behind her followed a man with a suitcase, wearing a black suit, sunglasses, and a big afro. He was not very tall, only about 1.7 meters. But he looked very proud, with his head raised high. Everyone could almost see his brain, which had little stock, from his nostrils. After the audience in the live broadcast room saw the two, some of them were immediately excited. "Wow, it's Wanwan. She's actually here to participate in a dating show. Could it be that my prayers have worked? The most hardworking little bee in the entertainment industry is here to collect honey. Wow, Brother Fei is actually here to participate in a dating show. That's really cool. Who's that big-haired guy behind? Why does he look so stupid, like someone owes him 5 million? If you don't understand, please stop talking nonsense. This is Li Fei, the battle king of domestic underground rappers." After seeing Shen Yu and the others, Lin Feiwan showed a very sweet smile, walked over, and greeted everyone warmly. Ji Shuyi, Huang Ming and others who didn't know her relationship with Shen Yu also responded politely. Luo Ji, Su Jinyu and the others looked a little stiff. Lin Feiwan looked at Shen Yu's look today, with a flash of astonishment and confusion in her eyes. In her opinion, Shen Yu's dressing style is very monotonous. He usually wears whatever is comfortable. Chapter 122 Domineering Husband Protection in Summer. Shen Yu usually wears a simple round-face short-sleeved shirt with large shorts. The clothes she wore today were specially selected according to Shen Yu's previous style. Unexpectedly, Shen Yu changed his style. However, she was not discouraged. She came to Shen Yu and smiled and stretched out her hand. Long time no see, Ayu. As soon as their voice fell, Luo Ji and Su Jinyue's faces changed immediately. Even Ji Shuyi, who was standing next to her, looked at Lin Feiwan curiously, with a little more vigilance in his eyes. When Shen Yu saw Lin Feiwan reaching out his hand, he was at a loss as to what to do. At this moment, Luo Ji, who was beside Shen Yu, suddenly reached out her hand, held Lin Feiwan's hand, and said with a smile, "Just call him Shen Yu. Long time no see, old classmate." A fierce look flashed across the depths of Lin Feiwan's eyes, but his face remained calm. "Luo Ji, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Have you been doing well recently?" "Very well. These few days are the happiest days of my 3 years." Although the two were communicating normally, the guests at the scene and the audience in the live broadcast room felt chilled all over. "It's perfect, too perfect. The goddess Luo Ji domineeringly protects her husband. This is definitely a hot novel theme. What is the relationship between Shen Yu and Lin Feiwan? Why does she also call Shen Yu a you? Didn't I just say it, old classmate?" "No, your old classmate calls her so affectionately. Is she a serious old classmate?" "What's the matter? My wife's college classmate calls her that." Seeing this, Zhu Ji on the side hurriedly got up and pulled Lin Feiwan to sit next to him. "Wanwan, you are here too, sit down and take a rest." Because of Zhu Ji's interruption, the first round of battle between the two came to an end temporarily. Behind Lin Feiwan, the Afro saw that everyone was sitting there, and did not take the initiative to greet him, and his heart was immediately filled with displeasure. As a top player in the domestic underground rapper, he is very popular in the rap circle. He is a big shot on weekdays. However, after he came here, no one took the initiative to talk to him. You know, their group values face more than anything else. They are afraid that others will look down on them, so they are always complaining. Whenever they encounter something, they write it into their rap and start to diss. They always say that impoliteness is true and shout freestyle all day long. But what he didn't know was that everyone didn't understand their industry, but they still respected him. As a result, he put on an expression that he didn't accept anyone as soon as he came in. Naturally, no one wanted to be ignored. Being ignored, he was furious. But he also knew that the show was being broadcast live. He suppressed his anger and took the initiative to say, "Hello everyone, I am Li Fei, you can also call me aka Feilong. I hope to get along well with you in the next week." "Hello." Seeing that everyone was so cold, Li Fei did not want to make things boring for himself, and sat down not far from Lin Feiwan. He met Lin Feiwan on the plane. After learning that the other party was also participating in the Heart-Beating Lover variety show, he immediately chatted with her enthusiastically. Although Lin Feiwan did not say much along the way, he was the one who found topics most of the time. However, the two of them got along well. Plus, the other guests did not seem to care much about him, so he had to come to Lin Feiwan's side. When Lin Feiwan saw Li Fei sitting next to her, a strong disgust flashed in the depths of her eyes. On the plane, she was making a plan. How to quickly bring Shen Yu back to her side. But Li Fei has been chattering since he got on the plane, making her ears hurt. Out of politeness, she didn't dare to point it out, but Li Fei was getting more and more aggressive, buzzing like a fly all the way. After finally arriving at the villa, and now sitting next to her. Wouldn't this make Shen Yu misunderstand? Thinking of this, she moved slightly towards Zhu Ji without leaving a trace. Luckily, Li Fei didn't see her little move. Otherwise the child might really be broken. After seeing all the guests arrive, Mengder walked into the hall with a smile on his face and said to Shen Yu and others, "I haven't seen you for a week, I miss you so much, I hope you like this shooting location." Wang Ming curled his lips and said, "TSK, it's all thanks to Shen Yu." Mengder continued shamelessly as if he didn't hear anything. The rules of this episode of Heart-Beating Lovers have changed a lot. In this episode, all guests can interact and pair up freely. The program team will absolutely not interfere. They will only provide you with equipment and protect everyone's safety. In the main live broadcast room of the program team, 5 sub-live broadcast rooms will be set up below, and the daily interactions of the 5 groups of guests will be filmed throughout the whole process. After hearing Mengde introduce the rules of the game, Luoji glared at Mengde fiercely. According to the rules of the previous episode, if their heart-beating connection was used, then she and Shen Yu would definitely be tied together every day. However, as it is now, although he can stay by Shen Yu's side, but including Su Jinyu and even Lin Feiwan, can get close to Shen Yu openly. After seeing Luoji's eyes, Mengde shrank his neck and dared not speak. A few days ago, Luoji had already called him and told him that she and Shen Yu would quit after participating in this episode of the Love Variety Show. So in order to squeeze out the value of his best friend, he finally made this decision. After all, this kind of drama of fighting for a husband is not only liked by men, but also by women. Shen Yu frowned when he heard this. What shall we eat? Mengde pointed to the back of the villa and said with a smile, it is inconvenient to deliver vegetables from Lucheng to the island, so the original owner has cultivated a vegetable garden and orchard here. You can take them by yourself, but remember not to waste them. The meat dishes are already in the refrigerator. As for seafood, you need your own skills. Finally, I wish all the guests a happy week and harvest their sweet love. Mengde did not stay after saying that, and left the villa directly. Their workplace is not inside the villa, but in the apartment next to the villa. This is the dormitory for the security personnel and staff on the island. After Mengde left, everyone looked at each other. Shen Yu smiled and said, is Lao Cao going to let it go? Wang Ming responded, Mengde is playing a little big this time. Isn't this a public travel? There is no task requirement. Every day, he just plays with the audience in the live broadcast room. It's too comfortable. Chapter 123 Beach Volleyball. Shen Yu sighed when he heard this. Mengde has given us a difficult problem. Su Jinyu, who was standing by, smiled when she heard this. Why think so much? Just have fun with the audience. We spent the last 2 days of the last episode the same way. It's really interesting without a script. Luo Ji, Guan Mingzhi, and others who were standing by nodded after hearing this. In the last few days of the last episode, they attended a wedding and visited a temple fair. There was no script either, and the audience of the program team still enjoyed it. Shen Yu also found that he had fallen into a misunderstanding, and smiled softly. Then let's take the audience to experience the island life together. Su Jinyu said with a smile. Let's go play beach volleyball. As she said that, she pulled Luo Ji and Shen Yu outside. Guan Mingzhi, Wang Ming and others also followed with a smile, and Lin Feiwan was no exception. Although Li Fei hated the feeling of being pushed. But seeing that the other guests had left, he didn't want to appear out of place, so he followed behind honestly. 10 minutes later, Shen Yu and others came to the beach. Su Jinyu jumped from the shelf and took an inflated volleyball. The group took off their shoes and socks and came to the net barefoot. Su Jinyu looked at the lineup of 5 men and 5 women, frowned and said, how should we divide the teams? We can't have 5 men and 5 women. Wang Ming pondered for a moment and suggested with a smile. How about this, Lao Shen and I will be the captains, each leading a team, and then everyone will choose the captain to follow. As soon as their voice fell, Su Jinyu and Luo Ji and immediately ran behind Shen Yu and said, I choose Shen Yu's team. Lin Feiwan, who was standing aside, had a slight change of expression and was about to walk over. But she was a little far away from Shen Yu at this time, and as soon as she moved, Guan Mingzhi and Ji Shui also naturally stood behind Shen Yu. So far, Shen Yu's team has been successfully full. Seeing this, Lin Feiwan could only stop and stomped his feet in the direction of Shen Yu. Zhu Ji, who was beside her, also had a trace of regret in his eyes at this time. Just now, she also had the idea of joining Shen Yu's team. After seeing Shen Yu's team configuration, Wang Ming said with a smile, Old Shen, your team doesn't have many main players. Don't cry if you lose later. Su Jinyu on the side was immediately unhappy. TSK, Brother Huang, you guys may not be able to beat us later. When Li Fei found out that he was assigned to Wang Ming's team by default, his eyes suddenly lit up. If you want to say who he hates the most in this show, it is undoubtedly Shen Yu. He also watched the last episode of Heart-Beating Lovers. After seeing Shen Yu was so popular, he was also full of dissatisfaction. Now that he has the opportunity to suppress Shen Yu, he will naturally not let it go. You know, he is a sports student. Although he is not from a famous school, he is much stronger than normal college entrance examination students. Even if he has not exercised in the past 2 years, he firmly believes that his physical fitness and strength can still beat everyone present. After the teams were divided, Huang Ming suddenly proposed, "Let's give our team a name." This statement immediately won the approval of everyone in the audience. Then the two teams gathered together and discussed. A few minutes later, both teams had their own team names. Huang Ming looked at Shen Yu with a heroic look. "Our team name is the Elite Squad. Are you scared?" Shen Yu looked at Huang Ming with contempt and said calmly, "Our team name is always Follow the Party." When the audience in the live broadcast room heard the team name, they were immediately shocked. Fuck, this team name is sublimated, and it is awe-inspiring. This guy is a monster, how can he come up with such a team name? Shen Yu gave me inspiration. I work for the government. I decided to hold this year's competition. Our team name is the People's Servant Team. Comrade upstairs, I hope you live up to this name. Then, both sides set up their positions on both sides of the block. Su Jinyu served first. From her appearance, she had played beach volleyball before and knew some basic skills. But girls are really weak. Huang Ming caught the ball from her almost effortlessly. He hit the ball back into the air. Seeing this, Shu Cai on the side jumped high and hit the ball back. Everyone played back and forth. In the sound of the sea breeze and waves, bursts of laughter came from time to time. The audience in the live broadcast room also watched with great interest. Especially Zhu Ji. This girl is really pleasing to the eye. When she runs, she is like a raging wave. It really makes the gentlemen in the live broadcast room unable to take their eyes away. Because it is for entertainment, Shen Yu did not exert any effort, maintaining a level similar to Guan Mingzhi, playing with everyone. Luo Ji and the other two basically made up the numbers. Under the siege of Huang Ming, Li Fei, and Shu Cai on the opposite side. They lost more than they won. But Shen Yu and the others did not care, as long as they had fun. After playing for more than half an hour, Li Fei looked at Shen Yu, who had lost the game, and was still smiling and chatting with Luo Ji and others, and suddenly he could not help himself. He had already been in the limelight even though he was holding back. After receiving the pass from Huang Ming, he jumped high and slapped the opponent with force. Luo Ji, Su Jinyu and others could not react at all, and were repeatedly attacked by Li Fei. Huang Ming turned around and wanted to remind Li Fei that this was just entertainment. But before he could say anything, Li Fei looked at Shen Yu and others and chuckled. "Your skills are not very good, you need to practice more." Su Jinyue's face suddenly darkened. It was originally an entertainment activity, and everyone was having a good time. You suddenly exerted your strength, and you didn't say anything if you had good skills, but you even mocked directly, which was a bit too much. Huang Ming's face was not good at this time. He looked at Li Fei and whispered, "Li Fei, hold back, this is just entertainment." But Li Fei didn't want to give up so easily. He was secretly happy inside, but pretended to be stupid on the surface. Isn't this a competition? I use my full strength to respect them." In the live broadcast room, the audience also had their own opinions and quarreled fiercely. Li Fei really doesn't know how to be gentle with women. She's a lesbian, why are you taking her so seriously? Come on, this is a competition, why don't you let her show her strength? Then there's no need to mock me. We're all here for fun, there's no need to do this. Why, you're not letting people say you're bad at playing. Chapter 124. I don't know, he caught the ball with his face. It was just for fun, it was a bit too much. Looking at Li Fei, who was proud and complacent, Shen Yu didn't say anything harsh, although he felt a strong dissatisfaction in his heart. But his face was still as calm as the waves. Like before, he picked up the ball and handed it to Su Jinyu to serve. Then he stood in front of the block. His eyes were no longer as lazy as before. His peach blossom eyes suddenly became extremely sharp, full of attacking intent. Huang Ming, who was standing opposite, was shocked when he saw Shen Yu's eyes. He had been with Shen Yu for a few days, and he had never seen Shen Yu show such eyes. Usually, he was always gentle and casual, and seemed easy to talk to. Huang Ming was not clear. But Lin Feiwan, who was not far away, saw it clearly. She understood that Shen Yu was really angry. Shen Yu was easygoing and easy to talk to. But if he was really angry, he would be the hardest to talk to. When the two were still in love, she had quarreled with others, and even wanted to fight. Shen Yu had shown such eyes. Seeing that Shen Yu did not admit defeat, Li Fei's face suddenly showed a trace of disdain. And his men were still merciless. What he didn't expect was that his charged attack was caught by Shen Yu this time. Shen Yu lifted the air volleyball up. Guanmingzhi on the side saw it and quickly hit it to a suitable height. Then, Shen Yu exerted force with both feet. Jumped high off the ground. His whole body almost expanded into a bow shape. His right hand was like a crescent moon in the air, and he hit the volleyball to the opposite side. Under the blessing of Shen Yu's huge force, the air volleyball drew a dotted line in the air. After seeing that his smash was caught, Li Fei was shocked, but he didn't care. After Shen Yu smashed, he didn't take it seriously. He didn't notice the abnormality until the ball came in front of him. At this time, he couldn't react. The air volleyball hit him hard in the face, making a bang. Li Fei's head was also slightly tilted back. Compared with volleyball, air volleyball is lighter and less likely to hurt people, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when it hits the face. In addition, Shen Yu was very strong, so Li Fei felt his face burning. After Shen Yu saw Li Fei being hit in the head, he was also stunned. He just hit the ball towards the open space. But Li Fei ran to the landing point of the volleyball with an excited look on his face. He didn't take it seriously at all. And he got a headshot. Shen Yu couldn't help but laugh and cry when he saw it. This guy is a talent. Compared to Shen Yu, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu, and even Ji Shuyi and Guanmingzhi, all looked gloating. They didn't forget how Li Fei mocked them just now. Su Jinyu looked at Li Fei, who was covering his face, and laughed and teased. "Oh, why are you so careless?" Seeing this, Luo Ji quickly pulled the corner of Su Jinyu's clothes and stopped her from saying the next thing. After all, it's a live broadcast now, and it's really not a good influence. Wang Ming also walked to Li Fei at this time. "Li Fei, how do you feel now? If you feel uncomfortable, let's go to the side and rest for a while." Li Fei's heart was filled with anger at this time. Thinking that he, a sports student, had suffered such a big loss from Shen Yu. He wanted to take revenge immediately, and his eyes were red with anger. He shook his head and said, "I'm fine, it won't affect our entertainment. This is an inflated volleyball, it won't hurt when it hits the body." When Li Fei said this, it seemed to have touched a painful spot on his face. He immediately grinned, and everyone couldn't help laughing when they saw it. When Wang Ming heard Li Fei say that he was fine, he stopped persuading him. And everyone returned to the court again. Li Fei didn't have as good concentration as Shen Yu. The moment he got the volleyball, the fierceness and anger in his eyes all played in the live broadcast room through the camera not far away. Many viewers in the live broadcast room were horrified after seeing this. "Fuck, what kind of look is this? It feels like he's going to kill Shen Yu. He was just hit by an inflated volleyball, and he ran over to catch it with his face. Shen Yu is really wronged. What do you know? This is called real. A real man never waits for revenge, skr. Wow, brother is so handsome and real. I like him so much. Brothers, can I imitate him? Show." On the court, Li Fei was like a mad vicious dog. As long as the ball was hit by the opponent, he would step forward in time to block it. Both offense and defense were in full bloom. It made Wang Ming and others have no game experience at all, and they were a little dissatisfied. But Shen Yu's spikes, he didn't catch them once. Either the ball had landed while he was running, or the racket hit him and bounced to the side. After more than 10 consecutive spikes, Li Fei realized that he was no match for Shen Yu. Shen Yu had been holding back before, but he didn't know how high the sky was and how deep the earth was, and he directly angered Shen Yu, so he was punished. Rappers are tough, not stupid. Knowing that he couldn't beat him, he wouldn't force himself to pretend. Just when he was still hesitating whether to bow his head and admit defeat, Shen Yu had already jumped high again, hitting the volleyball hard on the opponent's open space. As a result, the ball hadn't landed yet, and just when it reached the net, it suddenly made a puff in the air, and then directly changed its trajectory and fell on the beach in free fall. Wang Ming walked up to pick up the volleyball and took a look at it. Then he looked at Shen Yu with a shocked face and said, "This volleyball was blown up." As soon as these words came out, everyone's face suddenly showed a hint of surprise. They all came closer to check. Li Fei, who was not far away, heard that the volleyball was directly blown up. His face suddenly showed a deep horror. He didn't dare to think about how painful it would be if the ball hit him just now. The audience in the live broadcast room couldn't help but gasp after seeing this scene. "Oh my goodness, how violent it is. Girls, I feel sorry for this guy called Li Fei. It must be painful to be hit in the face with such force. Shen Yu's strength is too great. Is this the effect of daily exercise? Li Fei has hit a wall this time. Let's see if he will back down. Archer Filong, don't lose points. Be more alert." Su Jinyu picked up the volleyball with a big hole in it and said, "It's too fragile. I'll go to the shelf and get another one." Hearing Su Jinyu's words, the others looked terrified. Is it a problem that the ball is not solid? It's obviously that Shen Yu's strength is too great. Chapter 125. No matter what you call me, I'll call you Ayu. When Su Jinyu was about to run to get the inflated volleyball, Li Fei couldn't bear it anymore. Quickly stopped her and said, "Su Jinyu, don't go get it. I'm a little tired after playing for so long. Let's take a break." Su Jinyu's face suddenly showed a trace of contempt when she heard it. "If you are afraid, then you are afraid. What's the point of taking a break? You are really a hypocrite." However, seeing that the other guests were sweating profusely at this time, she didn't refuse. Compared to the panting of other guests, Shen Yu seemed a little calmer. He was slacking off for more than half an hour, and he really exerted himself in the last 10 minutes. With this amount of exercise, he didn't even sweat. Then, a group of people lay on the bed, eating fruit and looking into the distance. At this time, the sun had slowly begun to set in the west, and was about to disappear on the sea level. The sunset glowed the sky red, leaving a brilliant afterglow, especially dazzling and colorful. The accompanying photographer also understood the audience and moved the camera directly to the sunset. The audience in the live broadcast room were immediately attracted by this rare sunset at sea and immersed in the beautiful scenery of nature. After resting for a while, the sky was gradually getting dark. So, everyone returned to the villa. Shen Yu went to the kitchen first, then looked at Wang Ming and said, "Wang Ming, you take a few guests to the vegetable garden behind to pick some vegetables, I will cook dinner." Wang Ming heard this and responded, and immediately stood up, looked at Guanmingzhi and others and said with a smile, "It's dark, the female guest will go to the kitchen to help Shen Yu, and the male guest will go with me to pick vegetables." Wang Ming made such an arrangement, and everyone had no objection, even Li Fei did the same. After hearing that the female guest was going to the kitchen to help Shen Yu, the first person to take action was not Luo Ji, but Lin Feiwan, who had been prepared. When Wang Ming just spoke, she had already arrived at the kitchen door like an arrow. When Luo Ji and Su Jinyu saw it, their faces suddenly changed and they hurriedly followed. After Lin Feiwan came to the kitchen, she smiled and looked at Shen Yu and said, "Ayu, I'll help you." When Shen Yu saw Lin Feiwan coming in, a black line suddenly appeared on his forehead. If the camera in the kitchen was not turned on, he would have wanted to reiterate to Lin Feiwan that they were in a relationship. Now he has become a couple with Luo Ji, and his relationship with Lin Feiwan has become a thing of the past. He doesn't want Luo Ji to misunderstand. Fortunately, the next second, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu walked in. Shen Yu heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this, and then said, "We don't need your help for now. When old Huang and the others come back, Luo Ji, you can help wash and cut vegetables with everyone." Su Jinyu heard this and deliberately moved closer to Lin Feiwan and said loudly, "Okay, Shen Yu, let's wait for Brother Huang and the others in the living room, and let Luo Ji chat with you here." She walked out first after that. Zhu Ji and Ji Shuyi behind her also followed her out upon hearing this. Lin Feiwan was left alone, with a sullen look on his face. After struggling for a while, he turned around and walked out of the kitchen with a wronged look on his face. In the kitchen, only Shen Yu and Luo Ji were left. Luo Ji's heart suddenly started to ring with alarm bells. This was just the first day she came to the program group, and Lin Feiwan was so proactive. She couldn't resist the offensive. If she wasn't careful, she would almost take advantage of the opportunity. She looked at Shen Yu with some grievance and said, Ayu, can I not call me Luo Ji in the future? Then what should I call you? No matter what you call me, I will call you Ayu anyway. Then, I will call you Aji in the future. After hearing this, Luo Ji's face turned red as if by magic, and instantly became as rosy as a ripe peach. The two soft little hands were twisted into a knot behind her back. And after a long time, she uttered a hum softly from her lips. After hearing the conversation between the two, the audience in the live broadcast room stared with their eyes wide open. Are you not going to act anymore? Just make it official. Luo Ji is so brave. I don't care what you call me. Anyway, I call you a you. I really love this sentence. Luo Ji, who else? The fans of the healing group finally celebrate the new year today. Finally, they got wedding candy. By the way, what is the relationship between Lin Feiwan and Shen Yu? Why do I feel that her motives are not pure? After a while, Huang Ming and others walked into the villa with the picked vegetables. Seeing this, Su Jinyu and others took them directly into the kitchen and started washing and cutting vegetables. Shen Yu began to prepare the seasonings that would be used later. It is indeed a private island. The kitchen is ridiculously large. Shen Yu and the 5 female guests did not seem crowded at all. At this moment, Li Fei suddenly came in stealthily, opened the refrigerator and took a look, and when he saw the ingredients he wanted, he immediately showed a satisfied look on his face. Then, he looked at Shen Yu and said, Shen Yu, can I make a steak by myself? He had seen Shen Yu's performance in the first episode, and knew that Shen Yu's cooking skills were very good, but he found that Shen Yu seemed to only be able to cook Chinese food, not Western food. And he, who had studied in the United States for 4 years, was good at frying steak. He had some failures in sports in the afternoon, so he planned to dampen his enthusiasm from this aspect. Shen Yu was stunned for a moment, then chuckled and said, Of course, you can use everything in here at will. Li Fei nodded and pretended to apologize. Shen Yu, don't get me wrong, I've been in the United States for a long time, and I'm more used to eating Western food. Shen Yu frowned. Why do I feel that this guy is a bit pretentious? Seeing that Shen Yu didn't say anything, Li Fei set his sights on these female guests. He took out the steak and smiled, which he thought was very handsome. Ladies, do you want to eat steak? I'll make one for you. After Luo Ji and the others heard this, they felt a chill in their hearts and quickly shook their hands to refuse. No thank you, we can just eat Chinese food. Looking at Li Fei's arrogance and affectation, the 5 female guests were also a little disgusted. Li Fei treated them as fans who had never seen the world. It was just a shabby Western-style food. As the best in their fields, how could they not have eaten it? Among the 10 guests of the entire program group, except for Li Fei, the others had eaten the food cooked by Shen Yu. They were all eager to try it. Especially Lin Feiwan, who could eat the food easily, but could only enjoy it on the show. She could not care about Western food, steak, etc. Chapter 126 I will not lie. Shen Yu cooked very quickly. In less than an hour, a table of delicious food was freshly prepared. After smelling the tempting aroma, Su Jinyu and others swallowed their saliva unconsciously. Li Fei's face darkened a bit after smelling the fragrance. Although he saw Shen Yu's cooking skills were very good on the video, there was still a big gap between the screen and reality. He didn't expect it to smell so good. His mouth kept secreting saliva. He looked at the steak in his hand, which looked decent, and sighed in his heart. After the 10 guests sat around the table, Huang Ming gave chopsticks to each guest. When it was Li Fei's turn, Li Fei shook his head and refused. He said proudly, Thank you, I don't need chopsticks, I'll just use a knife and fork. Huang Ming didn't say much after hearing this, and took back the chopsticks directly. Xu Cai, who was standing aside, saw this and looked at Li Fei with pity. He wondered why the program team found a fool this time. He was confused at the time and was jealous of Shen Yu. He was not so tough. Not long ago, he was beaten to a pulp by Shen Yu in the beach volleyball game, and he was trembling with fear. Now he is arrogant again. He really has to endure the hardship. However, Xu Cai is not kind enough to remind Li Fei. One less person to eat means he can eat more. He must not let the food go to waste. He went to many star-rated hotels in Beijing during these few days, but found that there were almost no chefs who could compete with Shen Yu. The few top chefs could only reach Shen Yu's level in the dishes they were good at. The other dishes were still slightly inferior. Huang Ming looked at Shen Yu after everyone was seated, and said, "Old Shen, the program is going to start today, should we get a little tipsy?" Shen Yu's face was immediately dark. "Old Huang, don't you know how much I can drink? Let's eat quickly, or the food will get cold." However, Huang Ming obviously had no intention of letting Shen Yu go, and he quickly said, "Shen Yu, please don't, you are the traffic code of our program group, why don't you say a few words to the audience friends in the live broadcast room?" Shen Yu heard this, after glaring at Huang Ming. Put down his chopsticks and thought for a while before speaking. "Dear friends in front of the screen, thank you for your love and support for us and the program team of heart-beating lovers. In the next few days, we will strive to let you see better and higher quality content. I hope you will like it." After that, Shen Yu picked up the chopsticks and urged, "Everyone, eat quickly. The food will not taste good if it gets cold." Then Huang Ming and others turned into hungry wolves one by one. And their chopsticks were about to leave after images. And Luo Ji and Su Jinyu, who were on both sides of Shen Yu. But they picked up a chopstick of food in a very synchronous manner and put it on a plate to Shen Yu's mouth. Shen Yu was stunned on the spot. And his brain was thinking quickly about how to end it. These two women have developed muscle memory in the past 2 days. And subconsciously thought that their hands had not healed yet. It was not just Shen Yu. Other guests, including Huang Ming. After seeing this scene, they also stood there in a daze, with different expressions. The chopsticks in their hands also stopped in mid-air. After seeing Shen Yu did not open his mouth. Luo Ji and the others suddenly realized that this was not Shen Yu's home, but a show. They also stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. Shen Yu was quick-witted. He took the plates of both of them, switched them and said, "One of you likes braised pork and the other likes stir-fried beef. Why don't you just switch places? You have to help each other with more dishes." "Really?" Su Jinyue's mind turned quickly. Immediately followed Shen Yu's words. "What do you know? The dishes that sisters pick up taste better." Luo Ji did not speak, picked up the chopsticks and put the stir-fried beef on the plate into her mouth and chewed gently. Among the guests present, only Huang Ming knew what happened, and looked at Shen Yu with a teasing look on his face. Lin Feiwan, who was sitting opposite him, felt something was wrong subconsciously. But she didn't notice anything, and continued to eat. She hadn't eaten Shen Yu's food for a long time. Seeing that no one noticed anything, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu breathed a sigh of relief. Looked at each other, smiled awkwardly, and continued to eat. Unlike the guests present, the audience in the live broadcast room saw the scene clearly. "No, brothers, looking at the two just now, it doesn't look like they are going to exchange plates." Luo Ji and Su Jinyu were clearly looking at Shen Yu, but it felt like they were feeding Shen Yu. "I think so too, there is no need to raise the plate so high, it's right next to Shen Yu's mouth. Girls, I roughly know what's going on. Everyone knows that Shen Yu signed 2,000 books 2 days ago. His hands are swollen and he must not be able to eat. Luo Ji feeding him is understandable, as for Su Jinyu, I just can't understand it." Just as everyone was enjoying the meal, Li Fei, who was eating steak with a knife and fork in a corner, suddenly said with a look of enjoyment, "Hiss, if this is paired with a bottle of red wine and a piano piece, the style will be full. Western food is so ritualistic. I don't know when our Chinese food also has a sense of ritual like this kind of knife and fork cutting." Huang Ming and others frowned when they heard it. They were very resistant to Li Fei's behavior of belittling Chinese food. But they didn't know how to defend it. After all, Western food does pay attention to the sense of ritual. Puff. Suddenly, a small sound broke the silence. Everyone looked over and saw Shen Yu covering his mouth in embarrassment. After seeing everyone looking at him, he quickly explained, "Sorry everyone, I just thought of something happy." However, Li Fei didn't buy it at all. He looked at Shen Yu and said, "Shen Yu, were you laughing at me just now? Am I wrong?" Looking at Li Fei with a smug look on his face, Shen Yu slowly put down the chopsticks in his hand, looked at him with a serious face, and slowly said, "I won't lie, so I admit that I was laughing at you just now." Hearing Shen Yu say this, Li Fei's face suddenly became extremely ugly. He didn't expect that Shen Yu would dare to admit in front of so many people that he laughed at him directly. Isn't he afraid of being cyberbullied by fans for being rude? He looked at Shen Yu fiercely, and said word by word, Did I say something ridiculous? Shen Yu chuckled and said. You like Western food, and we like Chinese food. There is nothing wrong with different preferences, but you said that Western food has a sense of ceremony, and Chinese food does not, which is a big mistake. If Chinese food really pays attention to the sense of ceremony, you will keep making mistakes from the moment you accept the invitation. Do you know what is called bells and drums, and do you know the meaning of chopsticks? Chapter 127 Chopstick Culture. Hearing Shen Yu's words, Li Fei's face suddenly became extremely ugly. His hands holding the knife and fork had turned pale. But he was still unwilling to admit defeat easily, and he stubbornly retorted. Hey, who knows whether what you said is true or false? Shen Yu smiled softly. In China, it is not called a sense of ritual, but a rule. If you really want to pay attention to it, you may have to take an extra course. Mr. Lin Zexu once said that eating with a knife and fork is a sign of uncivilized people. By the way, you know who Mr. Lin Zexu is. Shen Yu's contemptuous and indifferent attitude, coupled with the other guests' secret gazes, made Li Fei, who was already a little ashamed, so angry that he almost exploded on the spot. He slammed the knife and fork on the table, looking at Shen Yu with red eyes. I won't argue with you about the rest. Why do chopsticks have a sense of ceremony compared to knives and forks? Shen Yu sighed, picked up the pair of chopsticks that had not been used before, and whispered. Do you know how long chopsticks are? Li Fei's face suddenly darkened. Why did he study the length of chopsticks when he had nothing to do? But Shen Yu didn't expect that he could give an answer. He spoke directly. 7 feet and 6 inches, representing that humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires, to show that they are essentially different from animals. Then, Shen Yu pointed to the head and tail of the chopsticks. One end of the chopsticks is square, and the other end is round, symbolizing that the sky is round and the earth is square. Use the round head to put rice. When the food is eaten, it is called, food is the first necessity of the people. Putting the 2 chopsticks together, he continued slowly, chopsticks have a symbol. Yin and yang cannot grow alone. 2 chopsticks must be used together. This is called yin and yang. When using, one is active and the other is passive. The active one is yang and the passive one is yin. One is on top and the other is on the bottom. The one on top is yang and the one on the bottom is yin. Finally, Shen Yu held the chopsticks and made the action of picking up the food. He looked at Li Fei and said, when using chopsticks, the thumb and index finger are on top, the ring finger is on the bottom, and the middle finger is in the middle. This is a metaphor for the culture of heaven, earth and man in our country. Tell me, is there any comparison between the knife and fork? After that, Shen Yu ignored Li Fei, who had a gloomy face, and continued to eat. Huang Ming and others were also shocked by Shen Yu's explanation of chopsticks. They never thought that the chopsticks they had used for 20 to 30 years could have so many metaphors. Luo Ji looked at Shen Yu, who seemed to be glowing in front of her. The happiness in her eyes almost overflowed. Seeing Shen Yu so outstanding, she was also proud of him. At this time, the audience in the live broadcast room were also shocked by Shen Yu's words. It took a long time for them to come back to their senses. Fuck, Chinese food really has so many rules. I just checked it online and was shocked. Not to mention eating, even serving tea and pouring water has its own rules. Western food uses knives and forks, you say it has a sense of ceremony. Chinese food is a little more troublesome, you say it has red tape. Chinese food has its own rules. Have you read Dream of the Red Chamber? Guess if you are Lin Diyu who just entered the mansion, or Liu Lao Lao who entered the Grand View Garden. I am ashamed. I have used chopsticks for more than 40 years, but no young people understand it. Shen Yu really taught me a lesson. Without Li Fei's interruption. The meal was quite satisfactory. After the meal, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu took the initiative to clean the kitchen, and Ji Shuyi and other 3 female guests also helped. Shen Yu, Huang Ming and others sat on the sofa and chatted. As for Li Fei, Shen Yu did not target Li Fei after he finished his popular science. Li Fei did not speak again after that. He was listless throughout the meal. Of course, no guest went to comfort him. After all, his expression just now was really uninteresting. At this time, Huang Ming suddenly looked at Shen Yu beside him and said, Old Shen, do you think we can go to the sea to catch seafood on Daohua Island? I saw many anchors who went to the sea to catch seafood on a certain audio and video before. Shen Yu looked at Huang Ming in surprise and said with a smile, "Hey, old Huang, great minds think alike. You said what I was about to say. I just looked at the tide table of Daohua Island. Tomorrow morning from 5 to 7 is very suitable for catching seafood." Huang Ming stood up excitedly after hearing this. "Really? I will contact the program team now and ask them to help prepare some work for catching seafood." Okay, I just asked the staff to prepare all these, don't worry, I'm worried about whether you can get up tomorrow." Hearing Shen Yu's doubt, Huang Ming said with contempt, "Old Shen, never question human curiosity and desire to explore." Just then, Luo Ji and other female guests came out of the kitchen. Huang Ming saw this and immediately informed everyone about the sea hunting tomorrow morning. Sure enough, after hearing the news, everyone was eager to try and couldn't wait to set off now. Seeing that everyone agreed, Shen Yu smiled and said, "Then tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock, everyone will gather in the living room and go to the sea together." Let's stop here for today's live broadcast. We are tired after running around all day. Everyone should have a good rest at night. After that, everyone faced the camera in the room and waved goodbye to the audience in front of the screen. In the program group not far away, Mengda gave an order, and the entire live broadcast room suddenly fell into darkness. At this time, Weibo, because of the program group of heart-beating lovers, became lively again. The stars who were originally preparing to create some gimmicks once again experienced this unreasonable and terrifying way of attracting traffic. In a short period of time, several hot searches landed directly in the top 10 of Weibo hot searches at the speed of falling stars. There was no capital behind them to buy traffic, but only the fans accumulated by this variety show. The second episode of Heart-Beating Lovers officially started broadcasting. Luo Ji domineeringly protects her husband. The Queen Lin Feiwan and him have to say 2 or 3 things. Shocked that a popular star actually bullied on the court. How complicated are the rules of Chinese food. Shen Yu, the protagonist of these hot searches, had washed up and was lying on the bed at this time. The next morning, Shen Yu was awakened by the alarm clock. He turned off the alarm clock in a daze and got up from the bed. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was not his biological clock yet, so he could only rely on the alarm clock to remind him. After Shen Yu got dressed and walked out, Huang Ming and others came out one after another soon. They came to the yard, and Shen Yu distributed the tools prepared by the program team, including gloves, buckets, clamps, small buckets, etc. to everyone. Then, Shen Yu led everyone to the beach. As soon as they walked out of the gate of the villa, the photographer arranged by the program team had followed with the camera, and the program started at the same time. Chapter 128. The Sea Hunting Team. As soon as the program started, thousands of viewers poured in instantly. Oh, they actually went to the beach. It's so interesting. Celebrities go to the beach. This gimmick is amazing. It's finally on. I'm so tired that I'm about to get dark circles under my eyes. Brother upstairs, you didn't sleep all night, did you? Aren't you all the same? Oh. We're not that stupid. We set the alarm for 5 o'clock and just woke up. By the beach. The tide had receded, and there were small puddles everywhere, and many reefs were exposed. Everyone was wearing special rain boots, so it didn't affect them. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sky was already bright. So there was no need to equip searchlights. At Shen Yu's command, the group began to look for seafood left by the tide on this vast beach. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu firmly occupied both sides of Shen Yu. Lin Feiwan wanted to get close to Shen Yu, but was forced to stay next to Luo Ji. Seeing this, Zhu Ji, her best friend, couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It was really a double whammy. She didn't have much contact with Shen Yu. Now her best friend came in person to rekindle their old relationship. She had no chance at all. Ji Shuyi, who was standing by, was also thinking the same thing, and her face was a little disappointed. On the other hand, Su Jinyu was excited. She was the kind of person who loved to eat and play. When she found seafood, she shouted excitedly. But when she was asked to catch it herself, she was timid and didn't dare to step forward. Even if she had a sea-catching tongs in her hand. There was no other way. Every time she found seafood, Shen Yu would step forward to help her catch it in the bucket. After a while, Su Jinyue's eyes suddenly lit up. She trotted a few steps, bent down and picked up a small turtle from the ground and said excitedly, "Shen Yu, I picked up a small turtle." Shen Yu said without raising his head, let it go, they can crawl back to the sea by themselves. Seeing that Shen Yu didn't even raise his head, Su Jinyu pouted her mouth, and she could hang 2 oil bottles. She pointed at the turtle and said, little turtle. Then she pointed at Shen Yu and whispered, big bastard. After saying that, she also smiled and carefully placed the turtle on the beach. Compared to Su Jinyu's casualness, Luo Ji on the other side of Shen Yu was much more serious. She was gentle on the outside but strong on the inside. Although she had never caught fish before, she still tried hard. With Shen Yu's guidance, she quickly got the hang of it. She had a lot of fun and the smile on her face never stopped. While catching fish, Shen Yu shared the seafood he caught with the guests around him and the audience in the live broadcast room, such as mussels, crabs, oysters, sea fish, etc., as well as some tips for catching fish. Shen Yu had sharp eyes and soon found another small hole on the beach not far ahead, the size of a fingernail. He waved to the photographer, then smiled at the camera and said, friends in front of the screen, there will be seafood under a small hole like this, most likely it is a king clam. After that, Shen Yu quickly dug around the hole with a small shovel. Humming. Digging on the big beach, digging small king clams, it's never enough to eat. Digging on the small workstation, eating the boss's cake and the colleague's melon. Luo Ji, who was standing by, heard Shen Yu's little tune and couldn't help laughing. She patted Shen Yu lightly and complained, what are you thinking about? Why does this song sound weird? At this time, Shen Yu also arrested the king clam that was about to escape. He looked at Luo Ji and said with a smile, isn't it appropriate to dig on the big beach? Luo Ji rolled her eyes at him and said helplessly, it's appropriate, okay? Shen Yu smiled and continued to lead everyone to start the sea hunting trip. Just when everyone was concentrating on the sea hunting business, a scream suddenly came from not far away, which immediately attracted everyone's attention. Shen Yu looked over and saw Li Fei screaming in pain. A crab the size of an apple was tightly clamping his finger with its pincers. Shen Yu saw this and hurried over. First, he directly fixed Li Fei's constantly shaking hands. Then he picked up a small stick from the ground and gently poked the crab's cheek. The next second, the crab loosened its claws and fell to the beach to escape quickly. Although this crab is relatively small, it can move more than 100 times its own size per second. The speed is about more than 30 kilometers per hour. As soon as it landed on the ground, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Shen Yu glanced at Li Fei's hand and said, fortunately, the skin is not broken. Don't worry, it will be fine after a while. Didn't I give you gloves? Why don't you wear them? Li Fei's face flushed a little when he heard this. In fact, he was wearing gloves just now. After seeing that this crab was very cute, he wanted to play with it. Not long after taking off the gloves, he was accidentally pinched by the crab. Seeing that Li Fei was unwilling to communicate, Shen Yu did not force him. After telling him to wear gloves, he turned and left. Seeing Shen Yu's back, Li Fei seemed to have made up his mind and said suddenly, thank you, Shen Yu. Shen Yu turned around and nodded to him, then continued to catch seafood. The audience in the live broadcast room were surprised after seeing this scene. Hey, I thought the rapper would only diss, but I didn't expect him to say thank you. Is Shen Yu and Li Fei a case of no acquaintance after fighting? Of course not, this is a plot of actively looking for trouble and being killed, and then being conquered. Fuck, I'm watching a love variety show, a sweet love between men and women, not this kind of stick fighting. About an hour later, Shen Yu looked at the harvest in his bucket and showed a satisfied look. Then he stopped and said to everyone, today's harvest is enough to eat, and everyone is tired. Let's end today's sea hunting here. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and supported their aching waists after hearing this. As household names, they don't usually exercise so much. At the beginning, they could still go to the sea well out of curiosity and desire to explore. But later, because they had to bend over and over again to go to the sea, their waists ached so much that they almost couldn't straighten their waists. And their backs were soaked with sweat. In fact, Wang Ming wanted to rest a long time ago, but seeing Shen Yu working non-stop, and the other female guests didn't mention it, he felt a little embarrassed. As for Luo Ji, Lin Feiwan and others, they were also exhausted a long time ago. But for some reason, they were unwilling to take the lead in asking for a rest, and they all held on. Chapter 129. He is really good at it. Shen Yu collected all their harvests from the 1-hour fishing trip and collected them all together. He was delighted to get a whole bucket of seafood. Seeing the full harvest, Shen Yu said excitedly, "Let's have seafood for free today." Huang Ming and others were also excited when they heard this. Compared to the expensive king crabs and lobsters in 5-star hotels, this bucket of cheap seafood made them look forward to it more, because it was earned by their own labor and was of great significance. After returning to the villa, everyone went back to their rooms and started to wash up. After more than 20 minutes, Shen Yu changed into clean clothes and walked out of the room. Carrying the seafood in the bucket, he began to wash it. After a while, Huang Ming and other male guests also came out of the room one by one to help Shen Yu wash the seafood. Girls usually take a longer time to take a shower, so they came out later. When Huang Ming walked into the kitchen, Shen Yu was picking up a crab from the bucket and preparing to clean its surface with a toothbrush. Huang Ming reminded him, "Old Shen, be careful not to get pinched." Shen Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm good at brushing." As soon as he finished speaking, the crab in his hand, with its claws bared, quickly clamped the brush in Shen Yu's hand with its 2 big claws. Huang Ming was about to laugh at him, but he found that Shen Yu took out another brush like a magic trick and calmly began to clean the crab. Huang Ming's eyes widened when he saw this scene. He looked at Shen Yu in astonishment and said loudly, "No, you are really good at it." "Yes, didn't I tell you that I am good at it?" Huang Ming's face turned black and he laughed and scolded, "How could I know that you really have the skills you said? I thought you had a unique method." Shen Yu did not tease him anymore. Because Huang Ming and others did not know how to handle seafood, Shen Yu arranged for them to clean the seafood, and he began to open the shells of mussels, scallops, etc. After that, Shen Yu started to cook a large pot of seafood porridge, and then paired it with 2 large plates of crabs, scallops, razor clams, shrimps and other seafood. Finally, after preparing the special dipping sauce, a very rich seafood breakfast was freshly baked. After working all morning, everyone was hungry. Sitting around the dining table, looking at the seafood, they couldn't take their eyes off it, and their mouths were drooling. Seeing this, Shen Yu smiled and said, "What are you waiting for? Enjoy the freedom of seafood." He put on gloves and took a prawn to cook it. Seeing this, other guests also rushed to enjoy the fruits of their labor. After seeing this luxurious breakfast, the audience in the live broadcast room had tears in their eyes. "Oh, I'm watching a dating show, not a food show. I can't stand it. I'm going to watch this so early in the morning. I'm sorry, Mr. Wallet. I'm going to go to the beach. Where can I go to the beach? Send me the location. Sisters upstairs, come to Dongshan, I'll take you to the beach." Shen Yu and others finished 2 large plates of seafood platters, plus a large bowl of seafood porridge for each person. After the meal, everyone touched their full stomachs with a look of unsatisfied satisfaction. And no one mentioned washing the dishes, because they were too full. Huang Ming looked at Shen Yu opposite him and asked with a smile, "Old Shen, what are we going to do later? Do you have any plans?" Now Huang Ming has subconsciously regarded Shen Yu as the backbone. Shen Yu did not answer, and threw the question directly to all the guests. "Do you have any ideas? You can bring them up for reference." When everyone heard this, they no longer concealed their ideas. Su Jinyu was the first to jump out and said, "I want to go diving. I wonder if it's possible." Guan Mingzhi immediately stood up and said, "I want to play the motorboat on the sea. It's so exciting. I want to play kayaking." Luo Ji, who was standing by, also said softly, "I want to go swimming." When Shen Yu heard this, he lowered his head and thought for a while, and then he said tentatively, "How about we play the beach activities today, and then play the sea activities in 2 days?" Everyone nodded when they heard this. When Shen Yu saw that everyone agreed, he smiled and said, "Okay, then our plan today is to swim at the beach, kayak, and do some fun activities on the beach, and then hold a bonfire party in the evening." When everyone heard this, they cheered immediately. Then, while the female guests were cleaning up the dishes, Shen Yu took Huang Ming and other male guests to the orchard behind the villa to pick some fruits to bring back. Then, they came to the beach with fruits and drinks. Shen Yu first opened a coconut for each person skillfully, and then lay comfortably on the bed, enjoying the sunbath. Guan Mingzhi and Xu Cai changed into swimming trunks early, and played kayaking under the guidance of the safety officer. After a while, Luoji suddenly came to Shen Yu, blushing and said, "Ayu, I want to go swimming with Jin Yu, but I'm not very good at swimming. Can you accompany me?" Shen Yu was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, "Okay, I'll go change into swimming trunks first." Luoji nodded, turned around and pulled Su Jinyu to the locker room. Lin Feiwan, who was standing by, saw this and immediately pulled Zhu Ji into the dressing room to change into swimsuits. Soon, Shen Yu came out in a pair of black swimming trunks, with his upper body exposed. Seeing Shen Yu coming out, Ji Shuyi, the only one who did not go to the dressing room, blushed slightly. Shen Yu's bronze skin, his 8 clear and well-shaped abdominal muscles and his sharp muscle lines, all exuded masculine charm. She, who had already had a good impression of Shen Yu, immediately fell for him. He was definitely thin when dressed and had muscles when undressed. The female viewers in the live broadcast room were all staring at him. This is something I can watch for free. I love these 8-pack abs, this dog waist, and these strong chest muscles. Luo Ji is eating too well. I was wondering why she likes Shen Yu so much. It turns out that everything has a reason. No, I can do what Luo Ji can do. I can do what Luo Ji can't do. I can unlock all 108 postures. Sister upstairs, please put on some pants. I can smell the sea water even though I'm not at the beach. This is the comment area, not the no man's land. No, he is a gentleman when he puts on clothes, but he turns into a little wolf dog when he takes off his clothes. Who can stand this contrast? Chapter 130 Swimming in the Sea. A few minutes later, Luo Ji and Su Jinyu also came out of the locker room. When Su Jinyu saw Shen Yu's figure, her eyes suddenly flashed with a brilliant light. Looking at Shen Yu's 8-pack abs infatuatedly. I don't know what she was thinking, but her face suddenly flushed. Luo Ji, who was standing by, also blushed at the moment. But she just glanced at it and didn't pay attention to it anymore. It's not that she is not interested. But that night she not only saw it, but also touched it. Shen Yu saw the 2 people coming out in bathrobes, and immediately came up to them. P.S. Brothers, don't go swimming at the beach casually, be careful of rip currents. If you have to experience it, you must go to a formal place, life is precious. Then the 3 of them walked to the beach together. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu took off the bath towels they had been wearing and slowly walked into the seawater bathing pool. Luo Ji was wearing an off-white one-piece swimsuit with a skirt design at the bottom. And the overall look was just like an ordinary dress, and she looked extremely youthful. Su Jinyu on the side was much bolder, although she was also wearing a one-piece swimsuit. But the overall bohemian style, and the large area of white skin exposed on the back, made the audience in the live broadcast room feast their eyes. And Shen Yu was also a little surprised after seeing it, and couldn't help but look at it twice more. From the moment she took off the bath towel, Su Jinyu had been secretly observing Shen Yu's expression. Seeing Shen Yu staring at her for a few seconds, a smug smile suddenly appeared on her face. She was completely relieved in her heart, and secretly sighed that she was still very attractive. In that situation just now, if Shen Yu was still not interested in her, it would be a huge blow to her. Swimming in the sea is different from swimming in a swimming pool or a stream as usual. As soon as I stepped into the sea, I could clearly feel the fluctuations and resistance of the sea water. The waves gently hit my body, as if I had entered a whole new world. At this moment, it seemed as if all the negative emotions were carried away to the depths of the sea by the waves. Su Jinyue's swimming skills were very good, and it was obvious that she practiced frequently. Her freestyle posture was very standard. On the other hand, Luo Ji was a little disappointing. Perhaps she was a little panicked because she was not surprised by swimming at the beach. Seeing this, Shen Yu jumped directly into the sea, and his arms suddenly paddled at the same time. His legs also closed together, and he whipped his legs at the same time. Their whole person swam quickly on the sea like an arrow from a string. It was the butterfly stroke, which was known as the most difficult swimming posture, and it was also the fastest way to swim. It required the continuity of movements and extremely strong power to be perfectly controlled. Shen Yu's operation at this time was a perfect textbook-level butterfly stroke teaching. In the live broadcast room, many viewers who loved butterfly stroke were stunned. They stared at Shen Yu's movements, fearing that they would miss any details. At this time, Shen Yu had come to Luo Ji's side. He lowered his legs and stomped hard. His whole body stood up and floated directly on the water. Then, Shen Yu stretched out his hand and gently placed it on Luo Ji's belly, lifting her up gently. He smiled and said, "You can swim boldly. I'll protect you by your side." After hearing Shen Yu's voice, Luo Ji's slightly panicked heart calmed down instantly, and her face was more smiling. She had never swam in the sea before, so she was very nervous after entering the water. In addition, the constant fluctuation of the sea water made her a little timid, and she didn't even reach her previous level. With Shen Yu's help, Luo Ji quickly adapted to the sea water. And she was no longer as nervous as before. Su Jinyu saw that Luo Ji could swim alone, and then swam over and looked at Shen Yu with curiosity. "Shen Yu, your butterfly stroke is really good, and the movements are as standard as the textbook. You must have practiced for a long time." Shen Yu lowered his head and thought for a while, then nodded and said, "It's really a long time, about a week." I said, "Definitely." Su Jinyu grinned, and the words came out without thinking, and came back to his senses the next second, looking at Shen Yu in shock. "1 week, you said you learned such a standard butterfly stroke in just 1 week?" "Yes, it only took me 1 week to learn it. I practiced for about 4 hours a day." After hearing Shen Yu's verse, Su Jinyu was like being struck by lightning and stood there stupidly. Shen Yu's words just now kept echoing in my mind. After hearing Shen Yu's words, the audience in the live broadcast room were all in disbelief. Impossible, absolutely impossible. How can anyone learn the textbook level butterfly stroke in a week, and 4 hours a day? This is simply a foolish dream. This is really hard to believe. I have practiced butterfly stroke for 3 years and it took me 4 months to learn butterfly stroke. I still can't reach the standard of beauty like Shen Yu. This is a bit too much, Shen Yu. It's not that we don't believe it, but you are too outrageous. No, do you believe that someone can write 5 hit songs in a week? Do you believe that someone is already a top singer-songwriter in his 20s, and is also a top chef, top writer, and poet? To be honest, if it was someone else, I wouldn't believe it, but Shen Yu said it. Although it's outrageous, I still think it's true, because he is really a person who can create miracles. Su Jinyu looked dazed. Luo Ji came to her side and said with a smile, "What are you comparing with him? He learns things very quickly. It usually takes 2 or 3 years of hard practice for others to learn. He can almost master it after practicing for an hour." Su Jinyu nodded and said, "Yes, why should I compare with a pervert? There is nothing to compare." After Shen Yu heard this, several black lines suddenly appeared on his face. He looked at Su Jinyu not far away speechlessly and said helplessly, "You can call him a genius or a monster, but you call him a pervert, which is a bit ambiguous." Su Jinyu stuck out her tongue awkwardly and smiled awkwardly. Sorry, my brain just had a seizure and suddenly this word popped out. I take it back, take it back." Seeing this flattering look, Shen Yu glared at her fiercely and then gave up. Lin Feiwan, who was far away, saw Shen Yu and the other two chatting animatedly, and swam over immediately. Chapter 131 Legs Weak. Zhu Ji, who was beside her, saw Lin Feiwan swimming towards Shen Yu, and his heart tightened, and he immediately moved towards Shen Yu. Her swimming skills were not very good to begin with, and her figure was so amazing that the resistance was very high in a calm swimming pool, let alone in the turbulent sea. But the harder she swam forward, the farther the distance between them became, and soon she was left behind by Lin Feiwan. In a hurry, she choked on several mouthfuls of water in a row, and she couldn't help but panic, completely forgetting that she could swim, and her hands were randomly flapping on the sea surface, and her whole body kept falling. The security guard who was always observing nearby saw it, and hurriedly swam towards Zhu Ji. Shen Yu also saw Zhu Ji sinking down, and his face suddenly changed. Like a fish, he swam towards Zhu Ji at a high speed. Lin Feiwan saw Shen Yu swimming towards her, and a long-lost smile suddenly appeared on her face. She secretly thought, Shen Yu still likes her, and he fell for her when she took the initiative to show her affection. She wore a slightly sexy swimsuit today. After seeing Shen Yu swimming towards her, she quietly waited for him. When Shen Yu came to her, she was about to say hello, but the next second, Shen Yu passed by her. The smile on Lin Feiwan's face froze in place. She was confused. She turned her head away in disbelief. It didn't matter if she didn't look at it. She was shocked. Her good friend Zhu Ji, who who had just chatted with her, was struggling hard in the water. Her face suddenly changed. Shen Yu quickly came to Zhu Ji's side. He dived under the water and hugged Zhu Ji's waist tightly. Then he kicked the water with his feet and the two of them floated to the surface. Looking at Zhu Ji, who was still struggling, Shen Yu said in a deep voice, "Don't move, it's safe." However, Zhu Ji was already shocked by fear and couldn't hear anything. Shen Yu had no choice but to pinch her cheek hard and said loudly, "Zhu Ji, you are safe now, don't move." Zhu Ji felt pain and slowly regained consciousness. When she saw herself at this moment, she leaned tightly in Shen Yu's arms. The two of them were separated by only the thin swimsuit on her body. And she could clearly feel Shen Yu's strong muscles. When her face suddenly became as red as a ripe peach, she was beautiful and charming. After seeing Zhu Ji come back to his senses, Shen Yu breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Zhu Ji and said, "What's the matter? Didn't you know how to swim just now?" Zhu Ji lowered his head and said awkwardly, "My swimming level is actually very average. After choking on a few mouthfuls of water just now, my mind was instantly in a mess and I forgot that I could swim." Shen Yu was speechless after hearing this. How could such a thing happen? He forgot that he could swim. However, looking at Zhu Ji, who had just survived the disaster, he didn't dare to say much. He whispered, "Then I will help you let go now. You continue swimming. Don't be afraid. The safety guards around can carry out rescue within 2 minutes." After hearing Shen Yu's words, Zhu Ji had no intention of letting Shen Yu go. She clung to Shen Yu tightly, her face flushed as she whispered, "My legs are a little weak, can you not leave for now, I'll just take a break." Shen Yu looked around and suggested, "How about I take you back to the shore first, you take a rest first." After hearing this, Zhu Ji thought for a moment and nodded. "Then I'll trouble you, Shen Yu." Then, Shen Yu held Zhu Ji with one hand and paddled hard with the other hand, swimming quickly towards the shore. Seeing this, Luo Ji, Su Jinyu and others also swam towards the shore in a hurry. Zhu Ji's sudden fall into the water just now also scared them. Soon, Shen Yu wrapped Zhu Ji and brought her to the shore. Then Shen Yu directly picked her up by the waist and placed her on the chair prepared by the program team. The program team staff on the shore also put a bath towel on Zhu Ji in time. After leaving Shen Yu's embrace, Zhu Ji suddenly felt lost, as if she had lost something. In fact, she didn't feel weak in the knees just now, but she really didn't want to leave Shen Yu's warm and solid embrace, so she deliberately said that her legs were weak and she couldn't swim. Not long after she sat down, Luo Ji, Su Jinyu and others also swam ashore and surrounded her, looking at her with concern. Zhu Ji looked at Luo Ji in front of him, and a trace of guilt suddenly surged in his heart, as if a mistress met his real girlfriend. Seeing everyone caring about her so much, she felt a warm current in her heart. She said with a touching face, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine, but my legs are a little weak. Don't worry about me. Let's continue playing." Lin Feiwan also came to Zhu Ji's side, holding her hand and saying with a guilty face, "Zhu Ji, I'm sorry, I didn't notice that you were drowning just now. It's all my fault." Looking at Lin Feiwan with a self-blaming face, Zhu Ji's resentment in her heart also disappeared. In fact, she didn't plan to swim in the sea at the beginning. She was very self-aware and knew that her level was very average. But she couldn't resist Lin Feiwan's repeated requests. Lin Feiwan patted her small chest and said that she would definitely take good care of herself. Zhu Ji agreed. "I didn't expect that after swimming with me for a while, Lin Feiwan would abandon me and go to Shen Yu's direction, leaving me behind, which almost caused an accident." After this happened, everyone lost the desire to continue swimming and chatted with Zhu Ji. Behind the scenes of the program, Mengder saw Zhu Ji drowning, and suddenly felt cold all over, and cold sweat broke out on his back. After seeing Shen Yu successfully bring her back to the shore, he finally put his heart at ease. He sat back on the sofa and breathed a sigh of relief. If she really drowned, it would be a terrible disaster. Guanmingzhi and others who were kayaking nearby also came back at this time. Zhu Ji saw that there were people standing around him. No matter how he tried to persuade them, it was useless. No one wanted to leave. He said again, "Then don't gather at the beach. Let's go to the bed and chat. Everyone can sit." After hearing this, everyone nodded. Shen Yu looked at Zhu Ji sitting on the chair and said softly, "Zhu Ji, can you still walk now?" "But, maybe not. My legs are still a little soft and I have no strength. Chapter 132 1, 2, 3, Wooden Man. Shen Yu didn't think much after hearing this. Bend down immediately. Pick up Zhu Ji again. Zhu Ji was shy in Shen Yu's arms. A sly look flashed in his eyes. He went straight to the bed and gently put Zhu Ji down. Shen Yu then opened a few more coconuts and distributed them to everyone. Seeing everyone sitting together, Shen Yu smiled and said, "It seems that no one has plans to play in the sea for the time being. Do you have any fun beach games to recommend?" Su Jinyu held a big coconut, took a sip happily, and then said, "How about we continue to play beach volleyball? We didn't have enough fun yesterday." Li Fei's face suddenly changed, and he said quickly, "Let's make a deal first. It's okay to play beach volleyball. Entertainment is the main thing, and safety comes first." As soon as their voice fell, Wang Ming and others couldn't help but burst out laughing. It seems that Shen Yu's operation yesterday left a shadow on Li Fei. The audience in the live broadcast room saw Li Fei with an embarrassed face, and they were also amused and laughed. "Har har har, I still like your unruly look before, you should recover." Shen Yu specializes in treating all kinds of disobedience, and the record can be checked. There is an old saying in our country, called, "He who knows the times is a hero." You have grasped the essence of it. Don't be scared, Feilong, otherwise you will be in the rapper circle. Shen Yu lowered his head and thought for a while, shook his head and said, "Let's not play beach volleyball today. We just played it yesterday, and the audience is visually fatigued. Besides, Zhu Ji needs a rest now, so we have to change a game." Ji Shuyi suddenly said, "How about another game of truth or dare?" Shen Yu thought about it and rejected the proposal again. The reason is that this game is too easy to get out of control. Except for himself and Luo Ji, all the people present are big stars. Some things can be said behind closed doors, but it is not appropriate to expose them in front of the public. Suddenly, Shen Yu had a good idea and said in surprise, "Hey, got it." Hearing that Shen Yu had a good idea, everyone immediately focused their attention on Shen Yu. Shen Yu smiled and looked at everyone and said, "Have you ever played 1, 2, 3 statues?" As soon as the voice fell, everyone who was expecting looked at Shen Yu in silence. Even Luo Ji couldn't help but give Shen Yu a blank look. Wang Ming complained directly, "Old Shen, you are older than me, you also proposed such an outdated game, it's too boring, change it quickly." Shen Yu heard this and said with a smile, "Old Wang, don't be impatient, wait for me to finish. My game is compared to the normal 1 2 3 Wooden Man, I have added something. When you shout 1 2 3 Wooden Man, everyone stops moving. When you shout 1 2 3 Sleeping Beauty, everyone needs to lie on their side and stand still in the posture of Sleeping Beauty." Shen Yu said while lying on the beach and posing. When everyone saw it, they immediately became interested. Then Shen Yu continued, "When you shout 1 2 3 Hero, you need to keep hitting your chest with both hands, and keep the rest of your body still." After seeing this action, Su Jinyu, Luo Ji and other female guests blushed. Luo Ji even glared at Shen Yu. This guy doesn't know there are female guests, why is he playing like this? However, Shen Yu didn't notice Luo Ji's eyes at this time. Then he made a golden rooster stand on one leg and said with a smile, "When I shout 1 2 3 Scarecrow, everyone needs to make a golden rooster stand on one leg and stay still. Zhu Ji can be the organizer, and we are the participants. How about it, are you interested in playing?" After everyone heard the rules of the game, they smiled and said, "It sounds good, do you want to try it?" After hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. They were also interested in what Shen Yu said just now. This is much more interesting than just 1 2 3 Wooden Man. Then, Shen Yu looked at Zhu Ji. "Zhu Ji, are you willing to be the organizer?" Zhu Ji nodded and said with a smile, "Of course I am willing, but I won't let you win." Shen Yu smiled and took out a sun hat from the shelf beside him and put it on Zhu Ji's head. Then whoever takes off the sun hat on Zhu Ji's head first will win. Just then, Li Fei raised his hand very abruptly. Shen Yu smiled and said, "Student Li Fei, if you have something to say, please speak." The two of them acted like a replica of the teacher and students answering questions in class in middle school. When Su Jinyu saw it, she just lay on the bed and laughed without any humanity. The other guests couldn't help laughing. Li Fei blushed immediately. He didn't know what happened just now. When he looked at Shen Yu, he subconsciously raised his hand and thought Shen Yu was a teacher in his school. Li Fei looked at everyone with resentment, like a wronged wife. It's a competition, so we have to set a prize. What is the reward if we win? His words immediately reminded everyone. Indeed, setting a reward can stimulate the atmosphere on the spot. Otherwise, there is no point in playing. A group of people began to discuss the final reward, but they never reached an agreement. Seeing this, Shen Yu suggested. How about this, the person who wins in the end can make a small request. Of course, it is a reasonable request that other guests can do. As soon as Shen Yu finished speaking, Su Jinyu and Lin Feiwan's eyes lit up. They instantly had different thoughts in their hearts. Luo Ji, who was standing by, suddenly became serious after hearing about the reward. Before, she thought it had nothing to do with her. Winning or not didn't matter. But it was different now. Lin Feiwan was like a hungry wolf, staring at Shen Yu, the delicious meat. This was Lin Feiwan's victory. If he made some excessive demands, she would be upset. The vigilance in her heart was raised to the highest level. Su Jinyu spoke first. I agree with the reward proposed by Shen Yu. The winner can make a request. Lin Feiwan and others were not to be outdone, and followed closely. I agree too. I agree too. Zhu Ji, who was standing by, couldn't help but feel a little regretful after seeing everyone so happy. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have pretended to be weak. She actually wanted to participate in the game and win this reward. If she hadn't almost drowned just now, she would have had few opportunities to contact Shen Yu. Chapter 133, Slapped in the Face. After seeing that everyone agreed, Shen Yu immediately made the decision and decided on the reward. Then, when the staff had finished the preparations, Zhu Ji stood at the finish line wearing a sun hat, with his back to everyone. And Shen Yu and others, standing in a row at the starting line. Each of them had a firm look in their eyes as if they were going to join the party, waiting for the game to begin. With the staff's order, Shen Yu and the 9 guests, like wild horses that had broken free from their reins, rushed towards Zhu Ji. And the next second after the staff's order, Zhu Ji turned around and shouted, 1, 2, 3, wooden man. Instantly, the 9 guests seemed to have pressed the pause button, forcing themselves to stop in place. Others were fine. Huang Ming had just raised his foot and made a diving motion. At this time, he was struggling to maintain it, and the whole person was shaky. Fortunately, he managed to hold on for 5 seconds. 5 seconds later, Zhu Ji turned around again. A sly look flashed in his eyes, and a sly smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. 2 seconds later, Zhu Ji quickly said, 1, 2, 3, scarecrow. As soon as their voice fell, Shen Yu and others stopped immediately and did the golden rooster stand. Only one person was different, Su Jinyu. At this time, Su Jinyu stood straight in the same place, tapping her grain bag with both hands. Zhu Ji looked back and couldn't help laughing. At this time, the staff on the side also tried to hold back their laughter and announced directly, Su Jinyu is eliminated. After hearing that she was eliminated, Su Jinyu was still confused, but after seeing the actions of other people around her, she immediately realized that she had made a mistake in the instructions, and her face suddenly turned red. After the audience in the live broadcast room saw Su Jinyu's embarrassment, they all laughed out loud. Har har har, I can't take it anymore. Goddess Jinyu is so confused. There is only this innocent and lovely female star in the film and television industry now. Lin Feiwan is half of it. As for the others, well, let's not talk about them. No, this picture is too weird. I'm going to make a GIF now. Brother, I have a friend. The one upstairs, you are my best friend from now on. Send it to me. After Su Jinyu left the competition venue with a red face, the game continued. Shen Yu, Li Fei and Guan Mingzhi firmly controlled the first echelon. The speed of the 3 was comparable. The second echelon was Huang Ming, Luo Ji, Lin Feiwan and Su Jinyu who had just been eliminated. The remaining Ji Shuyi and Shu Cai were at the end. But they were not far from the second echelon. 1, 2, 3, Sleeping Beauty. As Zhu Ji turned his head again, Shen Yu and others immediately lay on the beach, holding their heads with their hands, making the Sleeping Beauty pose. Just then, A staff member on the side suddenly announced. Wang Ming, Shu Cai is eliminated. Not to mention Shen Yu and others, even Wang Ming and Shu Cai were at a loss. Wang Ming immediately stood up, arguing to the staff. Hey, why am I suddenly eliminated? I didn't make any mistakes. The staff's face was a little red, and their speech was a little intermittent. Well, the postures of the two teachers are too abstract. Sleeping Beauty is lying on her side with her hands on her head, and you two are lying directly on your stomach. Teacher Huang, your butt is still sticking out. As soon as the staff finished speaking, all the guests in the audience were frantically suppressing their constantly raised corners of their mouths. Har 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 tilde. The next second, Shen Yu's reckless, gloating laughter sounded. It was like a switch. Everyone couldn't hold back any longer and laughed. Wang Ming's face suddenly turned black, and he glared at Shen Yu with hatred, and then left the competition venue. Shu Cai followed him with a dead heart. He didn't want to win the championship, although he also wanted to get the reward. But he knew clearly that it was impossible. Shen Yu's physical fitness was so good. If he competed with him, it would be like an egg hitting a stone, overestimating his own strength. He knew how much weight he had. Naturally, he would not give his face to others to hit him. Shen Yu looked at Wang Ming, who looked unhappy outside the competition venue, and said with a smile, Old Wang, sit down and rest for a while. I'll come back to show off to you when I win first place. Hearing Shen Yu's confident voice, Wang Ming curled his lips and said nothing. Because he believed it from the bottom of his heart. Shen Yu was so strong. After the game continued. After Zhu Ji turned his back, Shen Yu, Guan Mingzhi, and Li Fei rushed towards Zhu Ji one after another. And Ji Shuyi had already followed Luo Ji and Lin Feiwan at this time. 1, 2, 3, Wooden Man. A few seconds later, Zhu Ji quickly gave the command and turned around abruptly. Guan Mingzhi rushed too fast and did not stop for a moment. His body continued to rush forward by inertia. He forced himself to stop, causing him to stagger and fall on the beach. At the same time, he also pushed Shen Yu and Li Fei around him. The staff saw this and shouted loudly, Shen Yu, Guan Mingzhi, and Li Fei are eliminated. Please leave the competition venue. After seeing this dramatic result, Wang Ming on the sidelines laughed out loud and slapped his thigh excitedly. He looked at Shen Yu and teased him in the same tone as before. Old Wang, sit down and rest for a while. I'll come back to show off to you when I win first place. Shen Yu's face suddenly darkened. He didn't expect that the arrow he shot a minute ago would hit his forehead so quickly. He had no choice but to withdraw from the competition venue. Li Fei also looked depressed. He didn't expect that he didn't make any mistakes, but was implicated by his opponent. Guan Mingzhi tucked his head into his neck like a little quail. After leaving the competition venue, Guan Mingzhi immediately bowed to Shen Yu and Li Fei to apologize. Brother Shen, Li Fei, I'm really sorry. Because of me, you also withdrew from the competition. You two were both candidates who could win the competition. Looking at Guan Mingzhi with a self-blaming face, Shen Yu gently patted his shoulder and sighed. It's okay, don't take it to heart. It's just a game. Besides, you didn't mean it. At that moment, you couldn't control your body. Li Fei still had a little resentment and dissatisfaction in his heart. But after hearing what Shen Yu said, and Guan Mingzhi really didn't mean it, he didn't care about it. He directly stated, I don't blame you. Just like Brother Shen said, it's just a game. Winning or losing is not important. What's important is that we have fun. Chapter 134 One word harms two girls. Hearing Li Fei say this, Shen Yu also looked at him with some surprise, then nodded slightly. His impression of Li Fei also improved a lot. In the current competition venue, among the guests still participating in the competition, there are only 3 female guests, Luo Ji, Lin Feiwan and Ji Shuyi. The male guests have been annihilated and can only watch the game pitifully on the sidelines. On the field, the leading ones at this time are Luo Ji and Lin Feiwan. The two are moving forward together. Luo Ji turned her head to look at Lin Feiwan. Just at this time, Lin Feiwan was also looking at her. The moment their eyes collided, it seemed that sparks could be rubbed out between them. They both saw the determination and unwillingness to admit defeat in each other's eyes. With the official start of the game, the two were obviously more focused than before. This is no longer just a simple game. It has evolved into a duel between them. Afterwards, Zhu turned around several times in a row, and the three of them persisted tenaciously. Although the speed was a little slower than that of the male guest, it was much more stable. Seeing that the three were about to reach the finish line, Huang Ming and others on the staff on the side began to shout for encouragement. Shen Yu saw this and shouted loudly, "Come on, RG." Just at this time, Zhu also shouted instructions and turned around. 1, 2, 3, Scarecrow. The two people at the front were stunned on the spot. When Luoji heard Shen Yu calling him like this in front of so many people, his face turned red like a ripe red pomegranate. He was happy in his heart, but also felt a little embarrassed. Lin Feiwan beside her didn't think so. After hearing Shen Yu call Luoji like this, his face changed drastically. His brain crashed directly, and he stood there in a daze, not knowing what to think. When the staff saw this, they raised the flag in their hands and shouted, "Luoji and Lin Feiwan are eliminated." Shen Yu saw what he said, and he stunned Luoji, causing her to lose the game. She immediately shrank her neck and became a quail. When Luoji looked over, she could only smile awkwardly. Seeing Shen Yu like this, Luoji didn't say anything. She didn't care about winning or losing, but she had to start fighting in order to prevent Lin Feiwan from winning. Now that Lin Feiwan had withdrawn, she stopped worrying about it. Lin Feiwan also came back to her senses at this time, looked at Shen Yu meaningfully, and walked out of the competition venue. Then she fell silent, not knowing what she was thinking. At this time, Ji Shui was the only lone contestant left on the field. Being watched by everyone, Ji Shui's face was slightly red. After seeing this, Shen Yu couldn't help but suggest, since only Ji Shui is left, Ji Shui has won, and there is no need to compete anymore. Others shook their heads immediately after hearing this. Wang Ming smiled and said, "That won't work, we still have to continue. If Shui fails, we can restart, everyone has a chance." After hearing this, Shen Yu stopped trying to persuade. The game continued. Although Ji Shui's face was flushed, she was still playing steadily. She actually wanted to win this reward, and even thought about the content of the reward. It's just that she didn't expect that she could win this game. You know, at the beginning, she was in the third echelon with the least hope. The distance from the starting point to the end point was not too long. After Zhu Ji shouted two more instructions, Ji Shui successfully took off the sun hat on her head, which symbolized victory. After seeing Ji Shui succeed, except Shen Yu and Luoji, all the other guests sighed at the same time. After Ji Shui got the sun hat, she was relieved. She was able to concentrate and was under a lot of pressure just now. Then she smiled a little more. Just when she was about to meet up with Shen Yu and others, suddenly, Zhu Ji beside her called her and whispered, "Shui, you have won the game, can you give me this sun hat?" Ji Shui was stunned for a moment, looked at the sun hat in her hand, and looked at the shy Zhu Ji, as if she understood something in her heart. Nodded, and handed the sun hat in her hand to Zhu Ji. Zhu Ji saw this and immediately showed a look of joy on her face. She took the sun hat with both hands and put it back on her head. She smiled and looked at Ji Shui and said, "Thank you, Shui." Looking at Zhu Ji who thanked her, Ji Shui waved her hand quickly, "You're welcome. This hat is not a prize. The prize is just the request." After that, the two of them joined the crowd. After seeing Ji Shui coming, Shen Yu smiled and said, "Shui, have you thought about the request you want to make? Remember that it must be something we can do and reasonable." Ji Shui nodded and said, "I've thought about it." So fast. Huang Ming didn't expect that Ji Shui would think about it so quickly, and was a little surprised. Shen Yu said with a smile, "Just say it directly, the 8 of us are waiting for your instructions." Ji Shui blushed when he heard this, and clenched the corners of his clothes tightly with both hands. Then he looked up at Shen Yu and said, "Shen Yu, can I ask you to write a song for me? Don't worry, I will pay the corresponding fee, and we can share the copyright of the song." After hearing Ji Shui's words, Shen Yu was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Ji Shui would make such a request. It may be difficult for others, but it is very simple for him. After all, he holds the resources of the entire world. After seeing Shen Yu's hesitation to express his opinion, Ji Shui also showed some anxiety and embarrassment on her face. She also knew that this was just a game. She couldn't ask too much. However, her company asked her to release a new album recently. Because of the urgency, she had already created other songs and was still short of a title song. The company also helped her find some songs, but she didn't like them. She was planning to ask Shen Yu to invite her to write a song. Now that she won this award, she took this opportunity to ask if there was any chance. Shen Yu thought about it and said, "Okay, I promise you, what is the theme of your album?" Ji Shuyi was ready to be rejected by Shen Yu mercilessly. Unexpectedly, Shen Yu agreed to it. Her face, which was originally disappointed, was suddenly filled with smiles. Her eyes, looking at Shen Yu, were shining with stars. After seeing this scene, Luo Ji, who was standing by, couldn't help but sigh. And secretly cursed Shen Yu in her heart. Couldn't this guy be more restrained? He was too dazzling. And he captured another woman's heart. Chapter 135 Lovesickness is Born. When Ji Shuyi heard this, he immediately said, "My new album is themed on love. I hope it will be a song about lovesickness. Of course, if there is inspiration, anything with a love theme is fine." Shen Yu nodded after hearing this. "Okay, I got it. How about I write it for you after lunch this afternoon? Let's play games first." Ji Shuyi nodded and explained quickly. "It's okay. Don't worry. You can wait until the program is finished. Time is not that tight yet." Shen Yu nodded and didn't say anything more about this matter. He then greeted other guests and continued to play other beach games. It wasn't until noon that everyone stopped. After changing into their daily clothes in the locker room, they walked towards the villa with laughter. Wang Ming and others didn't even have time to enter the villa. They were sent by Shen Yu to pick vegetables in the vegetable garden. Shen Yu came to the kitchen, took out all the seafood left over from this morning, took out some beef and pork from the refrigerator, and began his cooking performance. Several female guests, including Luo Ji, helped Shen Yu. While watching Shen Yu's movements with fascination, Lin Feiwan stared at Shen Yu blankly. After Shen Yu shouted, "Come on Luo Ji," she seemed to have lost her soul, without any expression on her face. When Wang Ming and others came back with the vegetables, Shen Yu had already prepared all the meat dishes. In less than an hour, a table of steaming, delicious lunch was freshly prepared. Seeing the table full of delicious food, Wang Ming and others could not help but secretly swallow their saliva, their eyes full of desire. Among them, the most unbearable one was Li Fei. Last night, he looked down on Shen Yu with a proud face. But this morning he was conquered by the 2 plates of seafood platters, and became Shen Yu's little fan and loyal guardian. Not far away, at the backstage of the program group, Meng De's saliva was about to flow when he saw the delicious food on the table. If this table could only seat 10 people and it would be crowded with one more, he would have rushed in without shame. Compared to delicious food, face is nothing. After seeing this luxurious meal, the audience in the live broadcast room were envious and drooling like crazy. "Oh, I can't take it anymore. I'll order a takeaway for myself. I'm so greedy." "The one upstairs, I'm not saying anything bad about you. Let's just take a look. It won't be as luxurious as this. Brother, even if I only order a bowl of rice, I can eat it after seeing the delicious food on Shen Yu's table. Have you heard of looking at plums to quench thirst and pointing at geese to make soup? Fuck, the brother upstairs is so talented. Why didn't I think of it? I'll place an order now." During this meal, Wang Ming and others also ate until their stomachs were full, and then they put down their chopsticks. Their whole table of dishes was eaten up by 10 people. Even these female guests, they couldn't stop eating. Women can hold up half the sky, which is more perfectly reflected here. In the live broadcast room, Su Jinyu and Lin Feiwan's agents, after seeing this scene, they couldn't help but sigh. They couldn't blame Shen Yu, nor their own artists, and could only start a new and stricter weight loss plan. After dinner, Wang Ming took the male guests to wash the dishes. They couldn't always let the female guests wash the dishes. Of course, this didn't include Shen Yu, the great contributor to cooking. Shen Yu sat on the sofa with Luo Ji and others, chatting while digesting their food. At the same time, his mind was running fast, thinking about the song he wrote for Su Jinyu. He really didn't like songs, but having too many songs was also a relatively troublesome thing. He just didn't know which one to choose. After thinking for a long time, he finally decided on one of them, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Seeing this, Luo Ji smiled and asked, "Why are you so happy all of a sudden?" "I got some inspiration for the song I wrote for Shuyi." When Ji Shuyi heard this, her face was suddenly overjoyed. Although she had said before that she was not in a hurry, it would be in time to write after the show. But in her subconscious, she still hoped that Shen Yu could help her finish it earlier, so that she would have time to get used to it. Only by deeply understanding a song and experiencing the emotions contained in it can you sing the song better and resonate with music fans. This is also the principle she has always pursued and adhered to. She immediately got up and hurriedly trotted back to her room. And after a while, she came out with a stack of paper and a pen, handed it to Shen Yu and said, "Shen Yu, you can write down your inspiration." Shen Yu was stunned when he saw the same pen as his own. When Ji Shuyi saw Shen Yu notice the fountain pen, her face blushed. In fact, she had been using sketch pens and signature pens before. After seeing Shen Yu using a fountain pen, she bought the same fountain pen. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu beside her also noticed it and couldn't help but look at Ji Shuyi a few more times. The reason why they knew each other was very simple. They also bought the same fountain pen. Shen Yu did not refuse. After taking the paper and pen, he began to write furiously on the coffee table. Ji Shuyi originally thought that Shen Yu had some inspiration at the last minute. Although she was very happy and felt that Shen Yu was very concerned about this matter, she didn't care too much. It was just an inspiration, and it was far from her whole song. But she soon realized that something was wrong. A minute passed, and Shen Yu was still writing on the paper. This gave her a bold idea. Her heartbeat started beating fast, and she quickly came over. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu also came over. Zhu Ji, who was standing by, saw this and was curious. He and Lin Feiwan also came over. Shen Yu's paper was already full of lyrics. The two words with quotation marks on the top were obviously the name of the song Lovesickness. After seeing the lyrics, Ji Shuyi's body shook violently. This song was really written into her heart. The song about lovesickness that she had imagined was exactly the same as the one written by Shen Yu. She looked at Shen Yu, and her eyes were full of tenderness and love. Shen Yu was like her soulmate. He knew clearly what he wanted and presented it perfectly to her, which was simply the most perfect gift for him on stage. She looked at Luo Ji, who was also concentrating on reading the lyrics, and said sorry in her heart. From now on, she, Ji Shuyi, would start poaching. Chapter 136, This Thing is the Most Longing. After Shen Yu finished writing the lyrics, he handed it to Ji Shuyi, who was standing beside him, and said, "Take a look at the lyrics first, and I'll write the score now." When Ji Shuyi heard this, the surprise in his eyes overflowed directly. Looking at Shen Yu with burning eyes, not hiding his admiration for Shen Yu at all. She never thought that in such a short time, Shen Yu could actually complete the lyrics of the whole song. And from the looks of it, the music part had also been completed. Being able to complete a song in just a few hours, this is no longer a genius. She has never seen such a talented person. Her heart was already beating like a deer. Holding the lyrics of Xiong Sai in her hand, her mind had already flown away. At this time, Shen Yu did not pay attention to these details at all. He started writing again. The difficulty of drawing the score was much more difficult than the lyrics. It took Shen Yu nearly 20 minutes to finish it. After handing the lyrics and music to Ji Shuyi, Shen Yu breathed a sigh of relief and sat back on the sofa. After Ji Shuyi got the score, he sat aside and studied it attentively. She recited the song softly with her mouth and beat the rhythm subconsciously with her soft hands. A few minutes later, Ji Shuyi stood up suddenly, looked at Shen Yu with excitement. "Shen Yu, thank you, this song is more than enough to be the title song of my album. The title song I prepared before is simply eclipsed by your song. There is no comparison at all." Shen Yu waved his hand and said with a smile, "Shuyi, you are too kind. It's good that you like this song. I'm afraid you don't like it. How can I dislike it? This song really suits my heart." Ji Shuyi heard the words and quickly defended himself. "This song is really great, both the song and the tune are rare and excellent, which fully reflects the lovesickness, reluctance, nostalgia and letting go in love." Through the lyrics, she even saw the deep helplessness of the two men and women who couldn't get the love. On the side, Xu Cai, who had just come out of the kitchen, had not had time to see the lyrics and music of this song, and couldn't help but said with a smile, Ji Shuyi, why don't you work hard and sing this song live, so that we can appreciate Shen Yu's new work? At this time, Xu Cai no longer had the intention to do bad things. At the end of the last program, he had already admired Shen Yu's talent in music. Now he just wanted to appreciate Shen Yu's masterpiece. Ji Shuyi glanced at Xu Cai and said with a smile, Stop, don't even think about it, this is the title song of my new album, if you listen to it now, what will happen to my album? Xu Cai smiled and scratched his head awkwardly. He had forgotten about this. If Ji Shuyi agreed, and the album pre-sale was not ideal, then he would be guilty. Just when everyone focused on Ji Shuyi and the song in her hand, Shen Yu suddenly had an idea, and he picked up the pen and continued to write on the paper. Luo Ji and Su Jinyu saw it, and immediately came over. Others also gathered around him. 9 people surrounded Shen Yu tightly, and even the camera of the program team in the villa was blocked. They couldn't see what Shen Yu was writing at all. The audience in the live broadcast room was so anxious that they kept spinning and shouting that they wanted to deduct the chicken legs from the program staff. They were not professional at all. Shen Yu, who was surrounded by the guests, wrote the 2 big words, lovesickness, in thin gold font on the paper. Ji Shuyi was puzzled, and wondered if Shen Yu had made a song about lovesickness. Before she could think about it, Shen Yu continued to write. Red beans grow in the south, and a few branches sprout in spring. After seeing this sentence, Ji Shuyi immediately looked at the lyrics in her hand, and found that the first sentence of her lyrics was also, red beans grow in the south. And she immediately understood that the poem Shen Yu was writing now should be matched with the song he just gave her, which made her even more excited. You know, if a song wants to last for a long time, it must contain some cultural attributes. And there are even many songs which are directly composed of past poems. If Shen Yu's poem becomes popular, it will surely drive the sales of her song. At the same time, she was also a little confused. Why the lovesickness in Shen Yu's writing is always linked to red beans. But when she saw the following 2 lines of Shen Yu's poem, she immediately understood. I wish you would pick more of this, for this is the most acacia. The last line of the poem is like the finishing touch, linking the whole poem together, and explaining why it is red beans, because red beans are the most acacia. After Shen Yu put down his pen, Luo Ji was quick to take the paper with the poem in her hand. She didn't want the original manuscript of her boyfriend's poem to be taken away by others. Seeing this, Su Jinyu on the side couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Why didn't she think of it just now? And let Luo Ji get a big bargain in vain. The audience in the live broadcast room were as anxious as ants on a hot pot. They still didn't know what Shen Yu wrote. Behind the scenes of the program group, Mengder saw this situation and hurriedly got up and trotted towards the villa. After a while, she rushed to the crowd and said, Shen Yu, the audience also wants to know what you just wrote. After Mengder's reminder, everyone suddenly realized that they had forgotten the audience, and they all showed a bit of embarrassment on their faces. Seeing this, Mengder smiled and said, Luo Ji, how about I trouble you to recite what Shen Yu wrote? After hearing this, Luo Ji lowered her head and thought for a while, then nodded slightly. Then I will recite the ancient poem that Shen Yu wrote first, named Lovesickness. In the live broadcast room, after hearing that Shen Yu had just written an ancient poem, Beijing, in a courtyard, Ruoshi hurriedly ran to the yard with her mobile phone in hand. At this time, his grandfather, Mr. Feng Bingwen, was drinking tea and chatting about literature with an old friend. Seeing Feng Ruoshi's hurried look, he couldn't help but complain, Little Ruoshi, why are you in such a hurry? Can't you calm down a little and learn more from us old guys? I have taught you a lot. Before he finished speaking, Feng Ruoshi interrupted him directly, Grandpa, Shen Yu has created a new ancient poem. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Feng Bingwen jumped up from the recliner, not like an elderly man at all. Chapter 137 Hot Selling Red Beans. Then, Mr. Feng came to Feng Ruoshi like an arrow. An old friend beside him saw Feng Bingwen's appearance and couldn't help but sigh. Isn't it clear who little Feng looks like? Before they could think about it, Luo Ji's gentle voice with a strong Jiangnan flavor came out. Red beans grow in the south, and a few branches will grow in spring. I hope you will pick more, because this thing is the most nostalgic. This poem is not difficult to say, but it is very simple. The meaning is also very direct. That is, red beans grow in the warm and humid south. When spring comes and flowers bloom, I don't know how much they grow. I hope the people who miss them will pick more, because this thing is the most nostalgic. The whole poem does not have any metaphors, it is just a simple statement. But it expresses the nostalgia vividly. Not only Mr. Feng and Feng Ruoshi. Even the old gentleman who came to visit praised this poem highly. He looked at Feng Bingwen with some excitement and said, "Old Feng, is this the genius you mentioned before, Shen Yu who wrote the Peach Blossom Cottage song?" When Mr. Feng heard the old friend's question, he immediately said proudly, "Yes, it's Shen Xiaoyu. I didn't expect that he would write another high-quality story. He is indeed a genius. Old Feng, you must introduce him to me." After hearing the poem recited by Luo Ji, the audience in the live broadcast room could not sit still and went crazy. "Fuck, I want to report that Shen Yu is cheating. This is not something a human can do. It's really like Qin Shi Huang touching the wires. He won. In a short period of time, he actually created a song and a poem in succession. Although I haven't heard the song yet, the goddess Shui said it was the title song of her album. I think it must be of a high level. If there is another person in this world who can create miracles, it must be Shen Yu. I really want to dissect his brain. I feel it's even more outrageous than Einstein's brain." As soon as this poem came out, it immediately gained countless fans. Many male netizens with smarter brains have already started to buy red beans now. Whether they will give it to their girlfriends or their crushes. At the same time, reading this poem out loud will be a sure win. The other party will definitely be moved to tears. At that time, if you want to do something else, it will be simple and easy. I think tonight, many lovers will finally get married. In the Peach Blossom Island Villa. After Luo Ji finished reading the poem, she carefully put the paper away. Ji Shui said. After hesitating for a while, he stepped forward and whispered, "Luo Ji, can you give me this paper? You know me. This poem is very suitable for my song. I want to keep it well." Luo Ji frowned when she heard it. She was not willing to give Shen Yu's calligraphy to others so easily, because even she herself only had one manuscript of Qingping Jiao. She thought for a long time. Finally, she reluctantly handed over the manuscript of Xiangxi in her hand. She knew that this poem meant more to Ji Shui. Seeing that Luo Ji actually gave him the manuscript, Ji Shui was overjoyed. After receiving it with both hands, he bowed to Luo Ji and said, "Thank you, Luo Ji. I will keep it well." After that, he ran back to the room and put it away properly. After Ji Shui left, Luo Ji's face suddenly showed a sense of loss. Seeing this, Shen Yu whispered in her ear, "When I go back, I will write a painting for you with a brush. Don't mind it." After Luo Ji heard this, the loss on her face suddenly turned into a deep surprise. The brush writing is definitely more valuable for collection and commemoration than the pen writing. Seeing the two whispering, Su Jinyu suddenly leaned over and stared at them, saying, "What are you two secretly talking about? Let me hear it." Luo Ji hurriedly shook her head and said, "Nothing, nothing." Although she and Su Jinyu had temporarily formed an offensive and defensive alliance, it did not mean that she was willing to share what she had with Su Jinyu. Since she could enjoy it alone, she would naturally grit her teeth. Su Jinyu saw that she did not get the result she wanted, and looked at the two suspiciously, and said nothing more. Then, the 10 guests sat on the sofa and chatted while digesting the food. After more than an hour, everyone set off again and went to the beach. On the beach at this time, the staff had already started to prepare the things needed for the bonfire party. In the middle of the beach, a large wooden support had been built, and then the wood was piled into piles. Around the bonfire, the staff of the program group also prepared a barbecue grill. Shen Yu and others did not disturb the arrangement of the program group, and went straight to the beach volleyball court. Yesterday, because of Li Fei's provocation and Shen Yu's sudden outburst, Su Jinyu and others did not have enough fun. In the morning, they insisted on playing beach volleyball. Shen Yu refused because he took into account that Zhu Ji was a little weak. Now that everything has been adjusted, there is no reason to refuse. Su Jinyu excitedly brought a brand new inflatable volleyball. According to the original team yesterday, several people were divided into two sides. Su Jinyu was about to kick off the game. Suddenly she thought of something and said quickly. Let's make it clear that this is mainly for entertainment, and no one should get angry. Li Fei, don't look at others, I'm talking about you. Su Jinyue's straightforwardness made Li Fei's face suddenly more embarrassed. Wang Ming and others couldn't help laughing. Shen Yu also smiled. As a result, the next second, Su Jinyu pointed the spearhead at Shen Yu. Shen Yu, and you, if you blow up the air volleyball again, I will never let you go. The smile on Shen Yu's face suddenly stopped, and he touched his nose embarrassedly. With Su Jinyu as kickoff, the entertaining beach volleyball game officially began. Without the strong output of Li Fei and Shen Yu, everyone was also having fun, and even Luo Ji's smile increased a little. The audience in the live broadcast room were also dazzled. However, most of the eyes were still focused on Zhu Ji. Nothing else, it was just too pleasing to the eyes. Not many men can resist this kind of temptation. In this world, Liu Xiaohui is always the least, and Wei Xiaobao is the most. Even Shen Yu himself inadvertently saw the huge existence that was undulating due to running, was dazzled and lost his mind. While playing games, Zhu Ji also paid attention to Shen Yu from time to time. Seeing that he noticed her proud figure, he also had a little more secret joy in his heart. Chapter 138 Transformation. Zhu Ji is still very confident about her figure. She has been gifted since she was a child. Always the most eye-catching one among her peers. At the beginning, she was also troubled by this. Later, she gradually adapted to it. After she realized her feelings for Shen Yu, she felt a little inferior. Because compared to Luo Ji and Su Jinyu, even Ji Shui, she was a little inferior. The top female group star was not very tenable in front of the honors won by these three people. The only thing worth mentioning was her natural good figure. So when she saw Shen Yu in a daze, she felt a little happy. The group played beach volleyball for nearly 2 hours. And then stopped contentedly. Except Shen Yu, everyone else's face was covered with fine sweat. Then everyone went back to bed, drinking sweet and delicious coconut water, blowing the salty sea breeze, slowly recovering their strength. After resting for more than half an hour, Shen Yu stood up and looked at Luo Ji and said, Ji, do you want to go kayaking with me? As soon as he finished speaking, there were teasing voices all around, among which Wang Ming's voice was the loudest. After Luo Ji heard it, her face suddenly turned red. Being teased by so many people at the same time, she was immediately flustered. However, she still suppressed her shyness and nodded and agreed. As long as Shen Yu invited her, she couldn't bear to refuse. Seeing Luo Ji agreed, teasing voices rang out again. The two of them were completely unpretentious and showed off in front of the public. After seeing this scene, the audience in the live broadcast room started to eat sugar online one by one. Wow, I'm really tired of saying I'm envious. Lovers finally get married. You haven't been hiding it since you made it public, can you be more restrained? What, do singles have no human rights? Goddess Luo Ji has gone through 3 years of hardship, and now she has finally gotten what she wanted. What's wrong with our healing group showing some sweetness? We hope they can show some sweetness. Su Jinyu saw that Shen Yu only invited Luo Ji, and suddenly looked frustrated. She looked at Shen Yu with resentment and said directly, I want to go kayaking too. Shen Yu touched his nose awkwardly and said, I just saw that the kayak can only seat 2 people. Su Jinyue's face darkened when she heard that, and she said a little bit. Then you play with me again later, I don't dare to sit alone. As soon as Su Jinyu finished speaking, except Wang Ming and the 3 parties involved, everyone else looked at her in surprise. It seemed that they didn't expect that Su Jinyu could say such a thing. This is obviously to put Luo Ji in trouble. Wang Ming said nothing and sat quietly to watch the show. He had known for a long time that the relationship between the 3 was unusual. Standing aside cunningly, he wanted to see how Shen Yu would solve this problem. Shen Yu didn't know how to deal with it for a while, so he had to look at Luo Ji on the side. At this time, Su Jinyu also looked at Luo Ji, with a firm look in her eyes. Luo Ji also looked at Su Jinyu at the same time. After the two looked at each other for a while, Luo Ji sighed softly and took the initiative to say, since Jinyu doesn't dare to sit alone, you can take her to play for a while later. Luo Ji finally compromised. After all, the two are still in an offensive and defensive alliance, and they need to work together to block other peach blossoms. They can't have conflicts now. After hearing Luo Ji's words, Shen Yu also agreed directly and said, "Okay, then Jin Yu, you wait for a while, I will take Aji to play for a while first." Then the two walked towards the locker room. Seeing the backs of the two leaving, and looking at Su Jin Yu again, Ji Shuyi and Zhu Ji were thoughtful. Since losing the wooden man game at noon, Lin Feiwan, who had been expressionless, saw what happened just now, and his mind also began to think. When she was playing games before, Shen Yu's word, Aji, directly caused her to be in a state of confusion, and she was like a fool. You know, more than half a month ago, Shen Yu's only affectionate name was Wanwan. She didn't expect that after only half a month, Wanwan had become a thing of the past, and was replaced by Aji. She was already desperate. Although she divorced Shen Yu, she was undoubtedly the one who knew Shen Yu best. After all, they had lived together for 3 years. She knew that if Shen Yu could take the initiative to call her Aji, and in public, it meant that Shen Yu's heart had been completely open to Luo Ji. This also showed that Shen Yu's divorce from her, including his coldness to her in the past few days, was not because he was sulking and forcing her to bow her head as she thought, but because he had truly let go of the feelings of these years. After she figured this out, it was midsummer, but her heart became extremely cold almost instantly. She didn't know what to do at all, like a walking corpse. During these few hours, she regretted so much that she hated herself for breaking up with Shen Yu. After seeing the sweetness and tacit understanding between Shen Yu and Luo Ji, she was subconsciously ready to give up Shen Yu. As a result, Su Jinyue's strong joke just now suddenly gave her a glimmer of hope. You know, 3 years ago when Shen Yu was still single, Luo Ji and Shen Yu had feelings for each other earlier than she did. But in the end she took the initiative and inserted herself between the two. Finally she got the handsome man. Now seeing Su Jinyu like this, she seemed to see herself 3 years ago. The dead heart came back to life again. And it became stronger. At this time, she was relieved. Her role was no longer Shen Yu's ex-wife, but Lin Feiwan, who dared to charge for love 3 years ago just because she liked him. If Su Jinyu knew that, her whim and willfulness actually made Lin Feiwan start pursuing Shen Yu again, I wonder if she would regret it. At this time, Shen Yu and Luo Ji changed into their swimsuits. Then they came to the beach and chose a favorite kayak. Shen Yu first helped Luo Ji onto the kayak, and then climbed up gently. He handed Luo Ji a paddle and asked with a smile, "Arji, have you ever played kayaking before?" Luo Ji shook her head and said, "No, I have only paddled a small boat before, not a kayak like this. This one looks easy to capsize." Shen Yu nodded and said, "This one is indeed closer to the water surface. Compared with a small boat, there is a greater risk of capsizing, but as long as you master the skills, it is also easy to use." Chapter 139. The king of Xiong has a heart, but the goddess has no dream. After Shen Yu finished speaking, he picked up the paddle and taught Luo Ji the skills of kayaking. In fact, kayaking is not difficult. When paddling a kayak, you need to keep your upper body straight. Lean forward slightly, bend your legs naturally. Keep your knees in contact with the inner walls of the cabin, and step on the pedals in the cabin. Because a kayak does not have the stability of a boat, otherwise there will be a risk of capsizing. As for the paddling action, it is almost the same as a boat. If you want to turn right, paddle to the left of the boat, and if you want to turn left, paddle to the right of the boat. If you want to stop the boat, just put the paddle into the water. There is another problem that needs to be paid attention to when paddling a double kayak. That is, the operation of the two people must be unified. But this is not a big deal for Shen Yu. He just needs to follow Luo Ji's rhythm. Luo Ji quickly mastered the kayaking skills. So the two of them paddled slowly, chatting with a smile. The warm sunshine sprinkled on the two people and the deep blue sea. The sea surface suddenly sparkled, as if the sea was covered with a layer of golden gauze, which was very beautiful. And Shen Yu and Luo Ji, two handsome men and beautiful women, traveled in such a fairy tale world, like natural protagonists, complementing each other. It was as if they were an indispensable part of this beautiful picture. The audience in the live broadcast room saw the pictures uploaded from the drone, especially those girls with overflowing girlish hearts. Their eyes were full of longing. This picture was simply the scene in their dreams. I wish it was not Luo Ji who was in the picture now, but them. On the coast, looking at Shen Yu and the other person who were constantly going away. Lin Feiwan's face was full of unwillingness. She turned to look at her best friend Zhu Ji and said with a smile, "Zhu Ji, let's go kayaking, it looks like fun." When Zhu Ji heard this, her face was full of resistance. She drowned while swimming in the morning, which made her feel some resistance and fear towards the sea. Of course, she was also a little dissatisfied with Lin Feiwan, who had completely forgotten about her and went to look for Shen Yu. If Shen Yu was with her, she would be willing to give it a try. But now Lin Feiwan was alone, and she didn't dare to go no matter what. She waved her hand and refused directly. "I'm sorry, Wanwan, I drowned while swimming this morning. Now I'm a little afraid of going into the water. I won't accompany you today." After hearing Zhu Ji's refusal, Lin Feiwan was suddenly unhappy. But she didn't show it on her face. Because Zhu Ji's drowning had a lot to do with her. If she showed dissatisfaction, the audience in the live broadcast room were not just eating dry food, they would spray her to death with spit. She showed some guilt and said aggrievedly, "I'm sorry Zhu Ji, if it weren't for me, you might not have drowned." "Okay, I don't blame you, I'm fine, don't think too much, go kayaking." Just then, Li Fei, who was chatting with Xu Cai, heard Zhu Ji rejected Lin Feiwan's invitation, and immediately stood up and came to Lin Feiwan, showing a smile that he thought was warm but sunny. "Feiwan, I'll go kayaking with you, I also played this when I went to the beach with people from our label before." Xu Cai, who was standing by, saw Li Fei being so active and attentive, and immediately showed a look of watching a good show on his face. Since he unilaterally reconciled with Shen Yu, he has been paying attention to Shen Yu from time to time. Since Lin Feiwan came to the program group, he saw her secretly observing Shen Yu several times. Whenever Shen Yu and Luo Ji made any intimate actions, she could see a trace of dissatisfaction and jealousy on her face. He was not a fool, so he could naturally see the problem. But he did not intend to remind Li Fei. After all, who doesn't like to watch the fun? Lin Feiwan looked at Li Fei, who was very attentive, and her heart was full of resistance and disgust. Originally, Shen Yu ignored her now. If he saw her rowing with other men, it would be worse. Besides, what kind of celebrity is this Li Fei? An underground rapper, singing underground and freestyle all day long. How dare he invite a popular little queen like me? She shook her head expressionlessly and said in a somewhat stiff tone, "No, thank you. I just saw Zhu Ji constantly looking at the beach, and I thought she wanted to play, so I won't go." When Zhu Ji heard Lin Feiwan's words, his face turned slightly red, and he blamed Lin Feiwan in his heart. It was obviously she who wanted to chase Shen Yu, but in the end, she used herself to block the knife. This is really a sweetheart. But Zhu Ji couldn't refute it at this time, because she did look at the beach from time to time. But she didn't want to play, but to watch Shen Yu rowing in the distance. Su Jinyu, who was sitting on a recliner nearby, was the same. But compared to Zhu Ji, her face was more expectant, because she was the next one. After being rejected by Lin Feiwan, Li Fei raised his hand and touched his head awkwardly, and returned to his seat somewhat awkwardly. The audience in the live broadcast room couldn't help but sigh after seeing it. Alas, the man has feelings but the woman has no intention, poor Li Fei. Don't make a fuss, it's obvious that the king has feelings but the goddess has no dream. Anyway, it's obvious that Lin Feiwan has never opened her eyes to look at Li Fei, and her attention is on Shen Yu. Hasn't Shen Yu and Luo Ji officially announced it now? Why do I see Su Jinyu and Lin Feiwan still surrounding Shen Yu? Jimei upstairs, after seeing a rare genius in the world, right in front of you, will you give up on him and be willing to marry a mediocre person, even if he already has a partner? More than 20 minutes later, Shen Yu and Luo Ji paddled back to the coast in a kayak. When Su Jinyu saw it, she ran over excitedly. Coming to the two of them, she said excitedly, "Shen Yu, is it my turn?" Luo Ji looked at Su Jinyu, whose eyes were full of Shen Yu and not hers at all, and couldn't help but sigh. This girl is too persistent and too reckless. Shen Yu saw Su Jinyu and said with a wry smile, "I just came up and I haven't even had a sip of water." As soon as the voice fell, Su Jinyu trotted towards the bed and turned back while running. "Wait, I'll get you a coconut to quench your thirst." Shen Yu was surprised when he heard this. Even Luo Ji beside him didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looked at Shen Yu and said, "Okay, then you can accompany Jin Yu to row another circle."